I like Season 7 of Buffy. Now, comparing this to the previous season where it seemed like things just happened for the sake of things happening, Season 7 is thought out. It's paced very well and harkens back to all eras of the show, from the very beginning to the very end. It feels like a perfect circle. Does this season have its fair share of issues? Oh my god, yes. It's not the greatest season of the show by a long shot, but I don't find it to be anywhere near the worst either. Martin Oxon continued to act as showrunner for the season despite only writing 1.25 episodes. More explanation on what I mean later. With Joss Whedon sort of acting in the background, that's mostly because Whedon was busy with another project at the time. Firefly debuted on Fox at the same time as Buffy's final season did on UPN in September of 2002, and by the end of 2002, Firefly was cancelled, so Whedon rushed back to help write the ending of the show, which to me is the part that feels the most rocky. The crossover ban was lifted, allowing Buffy and its spin-off Angel to reference each other again and have characters go from one show to another. I have a feeling that it wasn't entirely limitless though, as only one Angel character appears on Buffy, and that's Angel, and only one Buffy character appears on Angel. So unfortunately there's no teaming up for the finale, although certain plot elements and character arcs are enhanced and developed across the two shows. Let's get right into the final season and see how the show ends, as this is an episodic analysis of Season 7 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The season opens in Istanbul, where a girl is chased by some hooded figures before being caught and stabbed to death using some sort of ritual dagger. Meanwhile in Sunnydale, Buffy is training Dawn to fight vampires, fulfilling the promise she made at the end of last season, in preparation for the reopening of Sunnydale High, where Dawn starts tomorrow. In England, Giles is taking Willow to learn at a Wicca school of sorts, teaching her how to control her abilities and that through magic the entire world is linked. Quitting is no longer an option, she must adapt and use magic for good. She's timid about everything considering she tried to kill everyone, but Giles is confident she can make a recovery and continue her life as the Willow she always was. Xander brings some construction plans to Buffy and Dawn and shows them that the place where the Hellmouth sits, which was once under the library, is now under the principal's office. They head to school where Buffy and Dawn meet Principal Robin Wood, the new principal, who has a charming yet suspicious nature to him.
I actually have heard of you, Miss Summers. You graduated from the old high school, am I right?
Yeah. How did you...
Well, I better get back to work. It's got to start deadening young minds. It's really nice to meet you.
Buffy stays around the school, confident something is bound to go tits up, and sure enough, the school is possessed by the spirits of people Buffy was unable to save when the school was last open. She embarrasses Dawn while trying to tell her during a class, and shortly after Dawn is attacked during the same class. She goes to the bathroom where she and another girl named Kit are attacked by the spirits again, and the floor opens as a result. This sets off Willow back in England, who proceeds to have a vision of what she calls the Earth's teeth. She figures out that this is a Hellmouth and something bad is coming. Likewise, Anya isn't doing well as a vengeance demon anymore. The humanity she once had is affecting her ability to enact merciless vengeance. Halfrick also warns her that something big is coming. I do love subtlety. In the school basement, Dawn and Kit find Carlos, another... Oh, I see what they're doing. Dawn calls Buffy for help, who heads down to the basement, finding Spike, and he's insane.
I dropped my board in the water and the charcoal ran.
Sure to be caned.
Should have seen that coming.
Buffy hasn't seen him since he tried to rape her and is completely unaware that he has a soul. She just thinks he's gone crazy, maybe due to the spirits. That being said, he does manage to tell Buffy that the spirits have been brought forth by a talisman, which Buffy managed to find earlier when she was first attacked. She calls Xander, who finds the talisman and destroys it, while Buffy finds Dawn, Kit and Carlos. She sends the other two to class, which Principal Wood is impressed by, considering they were two of the biggest troublemaker students prior to this school. He offers her a position working as a school counsellor, who the students can come and talk to if they have any worries or anxieties. She accepts because it's a handy way to keep an eye on everything, plus make money. In the final scene, Spike is taunted by a mystical force which takes the form of a villain from every season. First Warren, then Glory, Adam, the Mayor, Drusilla, and finally the Master.
Not about right, not about wrong.
It's about power.
I'm a bit here and there on this episode. There are elements of a Dawn and her annoying high school friends episode in here which everyone knows I couldn't give a monkey's about. Firstly, this entire season is an homage to the earlier seasons of the show in order to bring everything full circle. But this episode especially is a throwback to season 1. Not just having the setting be in the high school, but there's the cheesy drum cues and background music, the dark and moody lighting, having Dawn meet her own Xander and Willow, and the whole idea of an evil underground is very similar to the Master. Some elements of that I like, but I couldn't care for the whole cheesy Dawn finding her own Xander and Willow thing. It doesn't work for me, and considering these guys are never seen again, it makes me wonder why they were even here. We catch up with Buffy, Xander and Dawn, who are all definitely in higher spirits since the ending of last season. Willow is in England with Giles learning to overcome the evil side of magic with expert assistance from what I assume to be the Watcher's Council coven. Anya is flopping as a vengeance demon thanks to remembering what it was like to actually be a human being again. But the whole episode hints and teases the big bad, who we see at the end of the episode. It isn't named, but we have seen this beast before, and I'll talk about it in the future when the show decides to bring it up again. But the killing of the girl, the hooded figures, the morphing, it's all connected. Not a bad episode, but a poor season opener, especially for being written by Whedon, but like I mentioned, Buffy wasn't exactly his #1 priority. In Germany, we see another girl chased down and killed by the hooded figures. Her head rolls to the side and says the infamous words,
"From beneath you, it devours."
Dawn wakes Buffy up from her nightmare as it turns out this was a prophetic dream of the big bad's coming. Buffy begins her job as a school counsellor, chatting with Robin.
You open that door and these students will eat you alive.
You heard about Principal Flutie, right?
Oh, Principal Flutie, you are never forgotten.
In the arms of the angel, fly away.
She tries to find Spike in the basement, but he's nowhere to be found. In England, Willow gets ready to return to Sunnydale, but isn't sure she should as she hasn't finished her lessons yet, and doesn't feel completely confident that she won't float back to the dark side. Giles encourages her to help her friends as the vision she had is a vital warning that they need her for whatever's coming. Xander runs into a woman named Nancy who is chased by a worm demon which eats her dog. Spike shows up seemingly normal and offers to help them. They're not exactly happy at his arrival considering the circumstances he left under.
If you hurt my sister at all, touch her, you're gonna wake up on fire.
Ooh, you're hard, showing off.
He warns them that he knows about the thing that's coming and they'll need all the help they can get. Anyway, they go and investigate the scene of the crime where Spike admits that apologising won't do shit, so he just tells her that he's changed. Xander takes Nancy home, who asks him out until that's put on hold by the worm demon showing up again. It leaves and Xander figures out from what Nancy says about her ex-boyfriend that she made a wish to a vengeance demon. The gang all head to the Bronze where they find Anya, who admits to turning Nancy's ex-boyfriend into the worm demon. The show pokes fun at the overabundance of soap opera-like romance storylines from last season here, and a great scene where Nancy tries to figure out how they all know each other.
Weren't you Buffy?
Briefly.
Never serious. Is there anyone here that hasn't slept together? Look, at least we're all
Anya realises that Spike has a soul, and to stop her from telling everyone, he attacks her, which causes Nancy to run off. Buffy, after beating up Spike, heads after Nancy and saves her from being killed by the worm demon. Xander, meanwhile, pleads with Anya to reverse the spell, which she does just this once. This happens right as Spike impales it with a pole, and his chip goes off, returning him to his babbling and insane state from last episode.
From beneath you, it devours.
While Xander and Anya call for an ambulance, Buffy heads after Spike, finding him in a church. He rambles about nonsense and tries to make advances on Buffy again until he says something which lets it all slip.
Angel, you should have warned me. Makes a good show, forget it, bud. It's here, in me.
Buffy figures out that Spike has a soul and asks him why.
Why would you
Buffy, shame on you. What does a man do that he mustn't for her to be hers?
As he drapes himself over the big crucifix on the altar, Buffy watches on, teary-eyed. This is a good episode. I enjoyed it. There are definitely points that are better than others. Firstly, the final scene in the episode was originally written by Douglas Petrie, who wrote the rest of the episode, but after filming the whole thing, Whedon was unhappy with the dialogue and rewrote the entire scene himself, which is the version that appears in the episode. This scene is superb. James Marsters and Sarah Michelle Gellar act it brilliantly, and it's one of my highlights of the whole show. That shot of Spike burning on the cross, come on, that's iconic. Reminds me of when the Master burned himself on that big cross in season 1. The rest of the episode is fine. More unravelling of the main plot happens with the prophetic dream and the introduction of the phrase "from beneath you it devours." This phrase will be used throughout the season, so I recommend you get used to it. The story with Nancy and her worm boyfriend is alright. It's mainly used as a way to get the gang to reconnect with Anya, who undoes her spell, which she'll be punished for. Considering she's already not doing great as a demon again, this won't help matters. Willow is pushed to return to Sunnydale to help the gang with whatever's coming, and that even if she isn't welcomed by them, that they'll need her presence. Cryptic much, Giles. The main gist of this episode is that Willow and the gang are seemingly separated in two different planes of existence, unable to see each other, despite others being able to see them both, all while being hunted by one of my favourite monsters of the weeks, the paralysing and flesh-eating Gnarl.
Can't wait to unwrap it.
Willow arrives back and thinks the gang are welcoming her back. She can't find them at the house despite hearing some strange noises, and Giles is unreachable. She goes to the new school where she finds Spike, who's still rambling like a maniac.
Someone isn't here. Button, who's got the button? My money's on the witch.
She finds a skinned body similar to Warren's after Willow is done with him. Determined to stop whatever demon is responsible, she goes to Anya, who begrudgingly does a spell with her to try and find the demon. One of the dots is in a cave, which alerts her to check it out. The gang, meanwhile, are concerned when Willow doesn't get off the plane and return home, desperate to find where she could be. They too find the skinned body, thinking Willow may be responsible, although they certainly hope not. They go to Spike in case he knows any information, but he doesn't seem to be much help until...
Button, who's got the button? My money's on the witch. Red's a bad go.
They suspect Willow might be responsible for all the weird stuff happening with both Spike and the skinned body. Dawn does some research and finds out about Gnarl, a demon that eats human flesh while the victim is paralysed and still living. They get Spike to track it to the same cave where Dawn gets paralysed by Gnarl, although the gang are able to escape, and in order to trap the demon until they can fight it, they block the entrance with rocks. However, they don't know that Willow is also in the cave at the same time and gets trapped with Gnarl, who begins to eat her alive. Anya tells the gang about Willow trying to find them at the cave, and they leave the paralysed Dawn to rescue Willow, who might still be trapped in the cave. They save her, and after Buffy kills Gnarl, the paralysation wears off. And they begin to see each other again. As it turns out, Willow had subconsciously done a spell to make her invisible to the gang, afraid they wouldn't welcome her back after her dark turn. This obviously wasn't the case, and Willow returns to the house meditating with Buffy. This is one of my favourite episodes of the show. There's so many great points to talk about. Despite the fact it's a mainly filler episode with the only completed objective being to bring Willow back, I love Gnarl. This is a truly frightening concept for a demon, and while he doesn't put up much of a fight to Buffy, he still gets an A for effort in my book. And even though Willow is scared the gang won't accept her and that they'll be timid towards her due to their dark turn, she's proved somewhat right when the gang suspect her after finding the skinned body. Obviously it's never to be taken seriously, but there's a sense of mistrust even if it's slight and almost unspoken. Let's remember this moment for later. The Spike scene is superb, both versions, because the first time through you think Spike is just insanely rambling again, and although that's partly right, when the second POV comes in and things play out again, it all makes sense. Expertly done, and I wouldn't expect less from Jane Espenson. Also, Spike calling Xander the Slayer's boy is an underrated moment.
The Slayer and her boy. They think you took the skin.
Her boy? I'm her boy?
Buffy begins counselling students in her new job at Sunnydale High until things take a turn for the strange when a girl named Cassie tells Buffy that she's going to die that coming Friday. First, she tells Robin in the worst way possible.
Talk like that is taken pretty seriously where I come from.
The hood?
Beverly Hills.
He shrugs it off as teenage melodramaticism, so Buffy has Dawn befriend Cassie to learn more about her. The gang do their own sleuthing, finding her website with morbid poetry and her medical records.
Strep throat, ear infections, yeast infections, none of my business. No real info here.
Meanwhile, Nicholas Brendan is telling us what kind of man he's going to be in 20 years.
A violent drunk?
Actually, he's talking about Cassie's father, who they eliminate as a suspect after talking to him. Cassie actually comes to them afterwards and tells him not to bother investigating. It's not suicide, she just knows that she'll die on Friday, that's all there is to it. The gang eliminates more suspects, including Spike and one of Cassie's friends, Mike, who she turned down going to the dance with. As it turns out, a group of students are going to sacrifice Cassie to a demon to gain wealth. Think back to Season 2's Reptile Boy for another example of this idea. They use Cassie because of her morbid poetry. People will think she just disappeared or killed herself. Very charming, boys. Buffy stops them along with Spike's help.
She'll tell you. Someday she'll tell you.
Remember that. However, as they leave, Cassie drops dead of a heart attack suddenly. Buffy concludes at the end of the episode that she will always try her best to save people, although there are some things she just can't stop. I take it Cassie was some sort of prophet, considering she's used as a good tool for foreshadowing with Spike. She also guesses not just her death, but also Buffy spilling a drink on her. It reminds me of that episode of Taggart with the psychic.
Inspector. Mind your head.
Oh, you bastard!
It provides Buffy with a challenge she's never really faced before, aside from with her own mother: death via means she can't prevent. I think it provides Buffy with a reminder without having her mention it, and that's why at first she's so distraught that she failed, until Dawn reminds her that she did save Cassie, just not from that death. Robin Wood is growing on me, I quite like him. There's something cool about the guy, he's quite easygoing, and although there is far more to him being here that we don't know about yet, he has good banter with Buffy, so I don't mind him sticking around for the time being. Willow visits Tara's grave. It's to bring Willow closure from Tara, and the ability to move on from her. I really enjoyed this episode. It reminds me a lot of the early seasons. In fact, a lot of these early episodes do. It's clearly an homage to these early days, just Giles-less. Anya makes no appearance this episode, her only scene being left on the cutting room floor, so let's make up for it with an Anya-centric episode. Drew Goddard is a new name to the writing team, starting his career working on Buffy's final season before moving to Angel to work on its final season. You might know him better as the creator of the Netflix show Daredevil. He's also written for Lost and has a good working relationship with J.J. Abrams. Cloverfield? That was this guy. His first episode surrounds Anya's backstory, where she was involved with Olaf in 880 AD. And if he looks familiar, it's because he cheated on Anya, so she turned him into a troll, which is the same troll who shows up in Season 5's Triangle. That's how she was recruited to the Vengeance Demons by D'Hoffryn, who I didn't know until recently was actually played by Andy Umberger, better known as the Coroner from L.A. Noire. In the present, Anya finally does a massive vengeance spell which kills a ton of frat boys at a party on the UC Sunnydale campus. She's clearly shaken up by the whole ordeal as she just happens to run into Willow, who's getting back to classes again. Willow investigates after she sees blood on Anya and finds that not just the girl who made the wish, but the demon she summoned to kill the frat boys is still there, and she uses her magic to stop it from killing her.
For God's sake, shut your whimpering mouth!
Willow tells Buffy and Xander who hunt the demon down and kill it. Back at the house, Xander gets frustrated with Willow when she reveals that Anya is responsible for the demon and that he wasn't told sooner. Buffy announces that she has no choice but to kill Anya, which Xander isn't too happy about.
Willow was different. She's a human. Anya's a demon.
And you're the Slayer. I see now how it's all very simple.
It is never simple.
Well, hang on, Buffy, because you just technically said it was pretty simple and then proceeded to change your mind only a second later. I don't know about you, but I think Drew Goddard's never written TV before this episode. Buffy does make a very good point about killing Angel, even though she didn't want to, and Buffy makes reference to the fact that Xander said that Willow told him to kick his ass.
Do you remember giving me Willow's message? Kick his ass?
I never said that.
This is different.
It is always different.
If you remember in Season 2, Xander didn't tell Buffy that Willow was going to try and re-ensoul Angel because he wanted Angela's dead, so he told Buffy that Willow said to kick his ass. This is the first time since that moment that this has been brought up, and it's the only time. That seemed like it was going to be a huge moment for the show, but I guess the writers forgot about it, until now anyway. How disappointing. Xander rushes off to find Anya before Buffy kills her, while Willow summons D'Hoffryn using the talisman he gave her back in Season 4's Something Blue, when he wanted to recruit her in order to talk about Anya's recent spell. Xander finds Anya at the frat house again, but can't convince her to try and undo the spell. Buffy appears and the two break into a heated battle until Buffy stabs Anya through the torso. We then suddenly flash back out of nowhere to the musical episode where Anya sings a new song about being Xander's wife. This comes, again, out of nowhere and seems a bit off-putting.
I will be his missus. I will be.
Oh, come on, that's ridiculous. Obviously this doesn't kill Anya, but the resumed fight is stopped when D'Hoffryn appears and asks Anya what she wants to do after he's confronted about the whole ordeal by Willow. Anya requests that the spell be undone, and D'Hoffryn has to kill a vengeance demon to summon that kind of power to undo a spell of this magnitude. Anya puts herself forward, but D'Hoffryn brings Halfric forward and kills her instead, her blood now on Anya's hands.
Never go for the kill when you can go for the pain.
He reverts Anya back to being a human again.
You should have killed me.
Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. From beneath you, it devours.
And he leaves, as Anya wanders out into the streets alone again, and Xander tells her that she's not alone and to get in contact with him if she ever needs anything. They should have killed Anya. They should have killed her here. I know some of you might think this means I hate Anya, but I don't. She's a good character. It's just that since the wedding, they've had no clue what the fuck to do with her, and it's more painful than if they just killed her off.
Never go for the kill when you can go for the pain.
Ha! Are we sure this wasn't a Whedon quote that Goddard wrote into the episode? She was turned back into a vengeance demon again, struggled with killing people, then overcame that in this episode by killing people before the whole thing is reversed to make her human again so that she can be a part of the gang. Now, if you don't think Anya should have been killed off here, that's fine, but wait until the end because you're going to wish they did her more justice here than later on. She's going to have not a lot to do for the rest of the season, and that is truly worse than her death. We do get to see a lot of her backstory, how she became a vengeance demon, what she was like in her prime, but the most ill-fitting is the musical flashback. I don't know why this was here. I take it that it was a cut song from the actual musical episode, and so they just slipped it in here. And it's a good song, but to smash cut to her having been stabbed, I just don't get it. It would have been really intriguing for the gang to fight one of their own, if they hadn't done it already twice before. I know I complained a lot, but this episode really wasn't that bad, to be honest. I enjoyed the flashbacks, and a lot of Anya's parts of this episode too, including dealing with the moral implications of killing the frat boys. We see a hint of Dark Willow again, this time during one of Willow's spells. This is probably because she didn't finish her fucking course at the magic school, but here she is, and let's see how this goes. Could have been better, but could have been worse. Oh god, I really don't want to do this next episode. Greenberg didn't do a bad job last year. The episodes he had were among some of the better moments of last season, but now he's gone and written perhaps the worst episode of the show. That's right guys, it's a Dawn and her annoying high school friends episode. The episode starts with Spike moving in with Xander in order to get him out of the basement that's driving him mad. Dawn falls head over heels for RJ, another student at Sunnydale High who's a quarterback for the school's American football team. She proceeds to have the most cringeworthy scenes of the whole show. The first one where she keeps trying to butt in on a conversation is bad enough, but the cheerleading part, I can't watch. It's not even a funny cringe, it's just hard to watch.
Razorbacks! Razorbacks, go! RJ!
See, the problem with things that are hard to watch is usually that they're hard to watch. I didn't want to go on, yet I persevered. Dawn proceeds to cry and scream at Buffy, claiming she's in love with RJ, I want to fucking die, and then pushes the first starter quarterback down a flight of stairs so that he can't play and RJ can. Buffy isn't dumb and realises Dawn did this after she tries to deny it. She also has to stop Dawn from throwing herself all over RJ in public at the Bronze, where Dawn is also attacked by...
I know what you're doing, slut. I saw you. I saw you with RJ.
Oh, It's a really terrible actress.
I'll just add that to my list of reasons to die.
Later, Buffy confronts RJ before also falling in love with him too. She pulls him out of class to have sex with him in an empty room before Dawn, completely by chance, finds them while a fucking Coldplay song plays in the background. I really want to fucking die. Xander and Spike visit RJ's older brother, who was once a jock at Sunnydale High, but now is the opposite, and they suss out that the letter jacket had some sort of mystical power that makes women fall in love with whoever's wearing it. RJ visits the house where Anya and Willow meet him and also fall in love with him, so they all try and do something insane to prove their love to RJ. Willow tries to turn him into a woman, Anya robs a bank, Buffy tries to kill the principal, and the best scene of the entire episode. And Dawn tries to kill herself. You know, that's fucking funny. Xander and Spike take the jacket from RJ as Buffy comes to her senses and saves Dawn, outrunning a train to rescue her. Unfortunately, Coldplay doesn't play here too, and they all watch as the jacket burns in the fireplace. Because of the high school setting and crappy plotline, this episode feels so season 1, it almost hurts. This is the problem with going back to the idea of the early seasons, because the show outgrew this ridiculousness seasons ago. Season 5 was all about growing up. Season 6 was about wanting to give up. Season 7 is so far about going to school. The logic surrounding the jacket and its power is so inconsistent. Why isn't every girl falling in love with RJ, even when they pass by him in the halls? Buffy was in the vicinity of him when he was wearing the jacket before. Why didn't it work then? The best scene is the attempted assassination of the principal. This is a funny scene, and the highlight of the episode, but that is all that I will give this. I completely didn't even mention a scene at the start where Buffy saves Anya from being killed by a demon that's been sent after her by the Hoffren, who's just changed his mind and decided that Anya shouldn't live. Well, this never comes back up. It's a terrible way to bring her into the episode so that she can rejoin the gang and fall victim to the jacket spell. This is my least favourite episode of the show. I really struggled to find any part of this I enjoyed beyond one scene. This is worse than Beer Bad, and any of Season 6's bad episodes, simply because it's pointless, and it didn't need to be here. Similar to Double Meat Palace. They've done episodes similar to this before, like they even flash back to Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered when Xander does his love spell. You're showing us that we've done this premise before, you're literally showing us. And the sad thing is that this episode comes between good episodes. In comparison, Selfless is a masterpiece, and the next episode is actually one of the best of the season. So what happened here? While this episode only credits 2 writers, there are actually 4, however with good reason. This episode is split into 4 conversations with a different writer tackling each one. Jane Espenson wrote Dawn's part, Drew Goddard handled the trio stuff, while an uncredited Martin Oxon wrote Willow's segment, and an also uncredited Joss Whedon wrote Buffy's. Let's start with Dawn, who is home alone and proceeds to get contacted by the ghost of Joyce, her mother. Another spirit is stopping Joyce from telling Dawn something, so she manages to drive the spirit off, allowing her mother to tell her something important.
When it's bad, Buffy won't choose you. She'll be against you.
Apparently Buffy won't protect Dawn when it comes down to it, and that Dawn shouldn't trust her. Remember this. Jonathan and Andrew return to Sunnydale after having horrible nightmares in Mexico about a mystical seal under the high school. As it turns out, a manifestation of Warren tells Andrew that once he kills Jonathan, the two of them will become gods. Andrew kills Jonathan while he's reflecting on his life, and blood pours onto the seal. Willow is studying at the university library, where she's approached by the ghost of Cassie from a few episodes ago, who claims that Tara is trying to give her a message. However, she can't come herself, for some reason, because this is better. Cassie tries to get Willow to stop magic altogether, or else she won't be able to come back from the next spell and will kill everyone. Willow is at first taken aback by this, but she's suspicious when Cassie tells Willow to kill herself as it's the only way, and then she can be with Tara forever. Yeah, Willow isn't buying that, and sure enough, the spirit claims to be the source of the phrase "from beneath you it devours," and that it's ready to take on whatever the gang can throw at it because it plans to make them all suffer. It does a magic vanishing act in the most disturbing way possible. Buffy meets Holden Webster, a former classmate of hers from high school who's now a vampire. He happened to be majoring in psych and acts as Buffy's therapist while resisting the temptation to kill her. He actually does help her work through her problems, coming to the conclusion that
you do have a superiority complex, and you've got an inferiority complex about it.
This is a key quote to understanding Buffy and how she feels being the Slayer. Anyway, as she prepares to finally fight Holden, he reveals that the vampire who sired him was Spike. And right at that moment, we see Spike leave the bronze with a woman who he proceeds to feed from without his chip ever going off. And that's how the episode ends. What a brilliant episode. Obviously these 4 stories are interlaced with each other, but for breaking it down it was easier to tell them one after another. It's an intriguing way of slowly revealing and breaking down the big bad's big plan. All of this was orchestrated by the villain, who we still don't have a name for. Joyce's apparition isn't real and is designed to mess with Dawn's head. Same with Warren for Andrew, sacrificing Jonathan to pour blood on his seal, which, you guessed it, is the gate to the Hellmouth. Same again with Cassie for Willow to try and get her to kill herself. And finally Spike is killing. Remember when he was haunted by those visions of former visions in the first episode? That was this thing, and most of his madness in that that basement was actually caused by this thing, and only part of it was the soul. There's more to fill in here, but it's a great ending, having everything unveiled to the viewer who was probably falling for it all. There were a few cut ideas for the episode. For example, Xander doesn't appear at all, and this is the only episode of the show where that is the case. There was an original plan to have him talk with a vision of Jesse. Remember that guy who was his friend that died in the harvest and who's never spoken about again? Well, that would have been really interesting to see. Another was Halfrick appearing to Anya, but the actress who played Hallie, Kelly Rocha, wasn't available. Amber Benson was supposed to reprise her role as Tara and act as the vision that taunts Willow, but Benson has gone on record to say that due to both her experiences working on the show, and also the fact she believed that this would ruin her character's death having Tara appear as a villain, she outright declined to come back. I'm going to talk about that theory I mentioned in season 5, that Dawn was the cause of Joyce's tumour and subsequent aneurysm, because a viewer pointed me in the direction of an interview with Joss Whedon, who outright disproved this theory by saying that this was never his intention. Personally, I still think it all fits too well together to not headcanon it, but since the show never says it, I guess it's not the case. Jonathan is killed here, his death serving a purpose to the Big Bad's plan involving a seal. Andrew is key to his plan and is also key to this season. Who's excited? It's sad to see Jonathan go, considering how long he's been a part of the show, and while I would call his death anticlimactic or unnecessary, I would argue that he was never really a big part of the show. Even when he was a villain, it was Warren that you were supposed to detest, with Jonathan and Andrew pulled along for the ride whether they liked it or not. There's actually a brief mention of Scott Hope. Remember that guy Buffy dated for about 3 episodes in season 3?
Scott Hope said you were gay.
What? I dated that ringworm.
He says that about every girl he breaks up with. And then, last year, big surprise, he comes out.
Holden is played by Jonathan M. Woodward, who most Buffy fans will recognise more for his recurring role in Angel's 5th season as Nox rather than here. He's pivotal in helping Buffy overcome her worries and help put them into words. Spike is killing it and the Hellmouth is looking like it's going to be opened soon. Let's find out what happens next. Buffy begins to panic at the thought of Spike being back to his old self, even with the chip and the soul in effect, and she tells her worries to Xander, who echoes this fear. Back at the house, Willow comes home to Dawn and tells us that she was also approached by a dead person and that it's the Big Bad trying to mess with their heads. Something tells me that Dawn doesn't fully buy this, because of course she doesn't. Xander leaves Anya in charge of watching Spike while he's out working, which ends badly as he gets out and she calls Buffy to tell her so. Spike begins to hear a tune being played as he walks through the streets, humming it to himself. Buffy tracks him and attempts to follow him before losing him as Spike feels the urge to kill, luring a girl into an alleyway as he's encouraged to kill by what appears to be Buffy. He comes to after killing the girl and runs off. Buffy interrogates him the next day, but Spike reminds Buffy that he can't kill people and then proclaims his love for her again.
This chip, they did to me. I couldn't help it. But the soul I got on my own. For you.
He's certain he never killed anyone, but later that night he gets a brief vision of one of his previous kills and shoves Xander out of the way to go and investigate. He finds a vampire at the bronze that he sired a few nights ago, which proceeds to have one of the worst lines of the show.
So that all it was to you? A one-bite stand?
That is such a lame line. Spike kills the vampire and calls Buffy to tell her he's beginning to remember, which the Big Bad isn't happy about, although they can still make it work. He meets up with Buffy and takes her to a basement where all of the people he's murdered are buried. The Big Bad begins to hum the same tune again, which causes Spike to turn all homicidal again, and this time goes for Buffy. As all of the victims begin to rise, Spike gets a chance to drink from Buffy before inexplicably remembering everything completely all at once, which freaks him out. After staking the other vampires, Buffy realises that something has been messing with Spike's head after conversing with him, which is most likely the Big Bad, and she takes him back to her house where she keeps him captive in order to keep an eye on him for the time being. In the final scene of the episode, we head to London where Giles comes across a man named Robson who's been stabbed in his apartment. He tells Giles to gather them as it started. After those cliches, Giles seems to...
I'll take care.
Get decapitated. So, Spike is the main focus of this episode as he's a sleeper agent for the Big Bad. It activates him with a song called Early One Morning, which it hums and has played throughout the episode to change him into a homicidal maniac. We won't learn exactly why this causes Spike to go mad until later this season, but it's an interesting premise. The only thing I can't explain is how he remembers everything all at once right as he's about to kill Buffy. Was it luck? The powers that be? The Big Bad playing games? Or lazy writing? Anyway, he's with Buffy, who plans to learn more about this thing considering Spike is a big player in its plan. Giles is seen for the first time since last season and we learn both a little and nothing at all about what he's been up to in England. We know that this Robson guy is involved and this other girl that's been killed, and we see another hooded figure and that's really it. It's connected to the Big Bad, but we'll have to wait to see exactly how that is if Giles isn't totally dead after this thing swings an axe at him. Seriously, he's fucking dead, there's no way. Over 2 minutes of previously on. Christ. Buffy tries to call Giles at the council, however they have absolutely no idea where he is, and a returning Quentin Travers tells Buffy that they'll get right on tracking him down. He tells the rest of the council that Buffy isn't aware of something, and they begin quickly trying to find Giles. Back at the house, Spike goes a bit mad again while tied to a chair due to his thirst for human blood growing out of control. Willow offers to head to the butcher's to get some pig's blood for him. While she's there, she bumps into a familiar face.
Number 88.
Andrew has continued to be influenced by the big bad in both Warren and Jonathan form and tries to get him to commit some sort of sacrifice with a pig, but since Andrew is a bumbling fool, he can't do it and obtains blood from the butchers, where he runs into Willow. She takes him back to the house where he too is tied to a chair and interrogated by Anya and Xander, who do an iconic good cop bad cop routine.
You're gonna tell us what we need to know, and you're gonna tell us right now.
Anya, no! Stop it!
Get off me, Harris!
As Buffy returns to Spike, she hears him talking to himself while she's outside of the room, and he claims to not have any idea of what she's talking about when she does come in. He asks for some more blood, and as she turns away, he goes mad again and charges for the wall. On the other side, Andrew is proceeding to give in to Anya and Xander, telling them about the seal of Danzelthar until he's grabbed by Spike through the wall and bitten. After he's removed and knocked out by Buffy, the gang finally click that Spike is a sleeper agent for the big bad, and the gang get to researching for an answer as to what's going on and who exactly is pulling all these strings. At the high school, Robin finds Jonathan's body on the seal, seemingly by some form of mystical influence, and he proceeds to bury Jonathan's body far in the desert. Spike is now chained in the basement as Buffy shares a great scene with him where after he suggests to her that killing him would be the best course of action to keep everyone safe, she tells him that the reason she hasn't is because she believes in him to do the right thing and that she thinks he's changed. The house is then attacked by the hooded figures, which the gang managed to stop from coming after Andrew. However, it's all a distraction as Spike is gone, as he was the real target. Buffy recognises the hooded figures as the harbingers of death, or bringers for short, who she fought 4 seasons ago in the episode Amends. She finally identifies the big bad as the first evil, which warned her that it would eventually come for her. In England, the council begins to talk about the various attacks on other council operations in the world and that the first is behind it all. They plan to head to Sunnydale to help Buffy fight the first. And they're all dead. At the school, Spike is being held over the seal while his blood is poured onto it, activating the seal to open, revealing what lies beneath. So what the fuck is that thing? We'll find out next time. However, this is a big episode as the first is finally identified. If you remember back in season 3, the first tried to get Angel to kill himself by taunting him with visions of people he had killed, including Jenny, who didn't return for this season because Rabia Lamorte became a born-again Christian and didn't like playing the equivalent of pure evil on a fictional TV series. It can even influence people's dreams and make them question their sanity by taking the form of any dead person, which explains why it can take the form of Spike, since he died to become a vampire, and Buffy, who's died twice. The first seems to have some sort of hold on Robin, who seems to feel the presence of the seal in order to hide Jonathan's body. Is he working for it, perhaps? Andrew returns again and will now have a recurring role throughout the rest of the season as he's captured by the gang in order to stop him from doing anything else evil. He begins to spill everything that the First has told him about, including the seal, which explains why Spike suddenly tries to kill him under the First's influence to stop him talking. The Watcher's Council is killed in this episode. Travers and co are bombed by what we can assume to be the Bringers, but we'll find out a little more about how this happened later in the season. It's sad to see them go, but they were horrible people. We find out what the seal is all about. It unleashes a creature onto the world with Spike's blood, which the team are going to struggle with over the next few episodes. It's a good episode, and as Giles once said,
it's all finally making perfect sense, and I'm not going to miss a moment of it.
Andrew leads the gang to the seal in the school basement, following his confession to killing Jonathan, and they cover the seal up using some nearby shovels. They run into Robin on their way out, who's looking slightly dishevelled after returning from burying Jonathan, but he comes up with a story to cover up, which the gang don't buy. Willow tries to do a spell to protect the house, which ends up with her being possessed by the First temporarily, and they decide that magic isn't the greatest idea right now. In other news, Giles is here. Wait a minute, last time we saw him he was about to die. Now he's here and fine, and it confused the fuck out of me when I first watched it. I thought I'd missed something or zoned out during a follow-up scene, but no, this was intentional, as you'll see later. With him are 3 girls named Molly, Annabelle and Kennedy, who are potential slayers. He fills Buffy in on the first plan, which is to eliminate the slayer line by killing every potential, then Faith, and lastly Buffy. Giles has been leading a strategy to collect as many potentials as he can to keep them safe. However, they were found out when Robson was stabbed, and the other girl was another potential killed by the Bringers. He's brought them to Buffy to keep them as protected as possible. This explains the deaths of all the girls at the start of the season who are potential slayers. There's no way to stop the First, since it's quite literally evil incarnate and will always exist. However, they can foil its plan, and that's what they set out to do. That night, Willow begins to set up the sleeping arrangements, which Kennedy helps out with.
You, better not hug the covers.
Buffy and Giles head to the location of where the First lay last time Buffy fought it, which was underneath a Christmas tree lot. Buffy encounters the creature which came out of the seal, and Buffy finds herself in a pickle as staking it does nothing. She manages to climb out of the hole, and Giles informs her and the potentials about the Turakan. As already established, vampires are part human and part demon, created from the shell of the person who was once alive. This thing is what happens when there is no human half. It's pure, unfiltered vampire. It also looks a lot like the mutant enemy monster, which I think was on purpose. At work that day, Robin continues to act suspicious after burying Jonathan. Meanwhile, we see Spike and the First Slayer, which we can assume is in a cave connected to the high school somewhere, as they never tell us. He tries to use Drusilla to tempt Spike onto his side by having the Turrican kick the shit out of him, which doesn't work as Spike knows Buffy will come for him because she told him she still believes in him, so the first has the Turrican kick the shit out of him some more. That night the gang prepares for more bringer attacks as Annabelle, one of the potentials, has decided to run out as she didn't think she was safe there. She's killed by the Turrican and Buffy finds her after being informed of her departure, taking on the Turrican once more. This time she's stronger, she's more collected, eager to avenge the killed potential, so she has her ass handed to her by the Turrican. Wait, what? Yep, Buffy loses, but of course she isn't killed as the first seems to think that might call another Slayer, even though it didn't do that the last time she died because the Slayer line now runs through Faith, but okay. Buffy returns to the house completely battered and bruised, and Giles, of all people, begins to question her capabilities in front of the potentials that he's entrusted her with. What an asshole! So Buffy comes in and sets the record straight after overhearing this as she gives one of her best speeches in the show.
I'm standing on the mouth of hell and it is going to swallow me whole. And it'll choke on me.
One thing I didn't mention about this episode is that multiple times throughout the duration, Buffy falls asleep and has dreams involving her mother speaking to her about how she doesn't think she's ready for the big fight ahead. I'm not sure what this is. I know the First has control over people in their dreams, but could this be Buffy's own self-doubt coming into play? It's a theme of the episode as Buffy loses to the Turrican, but she doesn't seem too undetermined at the end. Actually, it's technically a theme of the whole season, as the first seeds are sown here, and the theme is Buffy's capabilities as a leader. Jill starts to wonder if she's prepared enough for what's coming and how serious it is. Oh boy, I can't wait for him to do a complete flip on this opinion later in the season when the stakes are arguably higher. I know why they do this here, and it'll all make some sort of sense in a few episodes' time, but also not really. I'll explain later. The dreaded potentials are introduced, which for some people is the defining reason why this season is one of the lowest rated. I get it. I can already tell I'm not really going to like any of them. They are complete novices thrown in at the deep end, who are all hopeless, and the ones that aren't all think they know better than Buffy. Kennedy is the infamous example of this idea. She's introduced in this episode, flirting with Willow. Oh, I've just had a marvellous idea. Why don't we introduce a new character who doesn't like the main character, who's one of the most beloved on the show, and have her replace another beloved character as a crappy love interest to give Willow a happy ending? On second thought, that sounds quite shit, doesn't it? Even if Kennedy is a hated character, she's actually one of the better potentials throughout the season in my opinion, although that's not saying a lot. There will be worse than this. Trust me. Fucking hell, at least Andrew's funny.
The council knows no other way.
And it cost them their lives.
Can we gag him?
We see Spike resist the First as he's held hostage and psychologically tortured to join its side. He believes Buffy will come for him since she told him last episode there's a reason she hasn't staked him at all. This episode is actually Marty Noxon's final writing credit for the show. I've had my ups and downs with her, but I have to respect the pure dedication she put into the show since joining the team in season 2. She wrote some of the best episodes of the show, including my favourite. Regardless of what she did with Riley and the direction she took with season 6 when she became showrunner, it was all still entertainment. The episode opens to a girl stepping off of a bus. Oh no, you get back on that fucking bus and leave again. This is Rona, a new potential who's received the word to head to Sunnydale, only just finding out she was a potential. At the house, Willow and Kennedy get to chatting as we learn about the rich background Kennedy comes from in New York.
Only got a half-sister. And we didn't have to share. Her bedroom was in a different wing of the house. Wing?
She tries to get Willow to do magic and get in the bed with her, both of which make Willow uncomfortable. Buffy takes Rona back to the house where she meets the gang alongside 3 new potentials who have arrived since last episode, Chloe, Eve and Vi. And yes, that's Felicia Day playing Vi. If this was 2012, I'm sure I'd be losing my shit. Jill suggests that they seek answers about the First from Bell Jocks' eye, which he and Anya do, where they find that the reason the First is only doing this now is because of Buffy's resurrection in season 6. This caused a disruption in the Slayer line, and it latched onto this opportunity to begin its plan, as Slayers are the only thing that pose a real threat to evil overcoming good. Well, unless you're a vampire with a soul. Or the other one. Willow receives a call from a member of the Coven back in England who tells her they felt the presence of a potential in Sunnydale a few days ago and thought they should know. Buffy and Xander investigate and find that the potential was killed and that it was Eve. At that moment, the First, as Eve, begins to put doubts into the heads of the other potentials. Buffy comes back and the First just sort of laughs in her face as it's seen and heard the entire layout and plan of the gang through its infiltration. It threatens that the Turrican will be sent tonight, so they better be ready. Thanks for the heads up there. The gang get to brainstorming about how they're going to take the Turrican on as a weird interaction happens between Xander and Kennedy.
What?
I said, trying is good.
Alright, you guys.
I just thought it'd be repeating.
Willow begins testing the waters of magic to see if the First will take over her again, and Kennedy interrupts.
Big, scary Willow. That's something I'd almost like to see.
No, you wouldn't.
Said almost.
The Turrican does indeed attack the house, not needing an invite like regular vampires, and Willow's barrier works, but not for long, as they all flee when it starts to tear it down. As Buffy splits up from the potentials to lead the Turrican away, it does a U-turn and heads for the direction of them anyway, as per the First's orders. Xander leads everyone to a construction site of his when the Turrican attacks. Suddenly lights come on, almost as if planned, and Buffy tells the potentials to watch, as Buffy is going to take it down as a lesson for them all in strength. We then get a flashback to that scene from earlier that it didn't make sense, where we found out that Buffy, Willow and Xander created the plan to lead the Turrican and potentials to the construction site in their heads through a psychic conversation carried by Willow. Buffy fights the Turrican, eventually overcoming it through her experience, and decapitates it, which does kill it. She follows this up with another speech proving her leadership and strength to the ever-annoying potentials, but for how long will they actually remember this moment before going back to acting superior? In the final scene, Spike tries to catch out the First disguised as Buffy, but it actually is Buffy, and she carries Spike out of the cave. So, I actually really like this episode, but there are a few things I'd like to talk about that I have issues with. Firstly, I've said it before, this cave that the First resides in for now, I'm assuming that it's connected to the school basement somewhere because of the seal bleeding a few episodes ago, but it's never really said, and also Buffy finds him at the end of the episode, I presume because it's connected to the high school, or maybe she tracked his scent, but I didn't think this was something a Slayer could do, because that's usually why they get Spike to track demons for them, right? It does make Spike right when he said that Buffy would come for him, and the relationship between these two has developed to such a great point. There's none of this weird sex stuff from last season, it's just Spike being a golden boy. In fact, that's what I like to call Spike's arc for the duration of this season, the golden boy arc, because he'll continue to be this soft-speaking, good-doing ally when he's not being used as a sleeper agent for the First. That's really the only way they can keep that darkness within him, as that blurry line of good and bad becomes ever more crystal clear as this season goes on. I like the whole psychic conversation that isn't explained until later, although we did a scene similar to this with Spike in Same Time, Same Place just 8 episodes ago, but I'll choose to just forget about that. Buffy has another speech at the end of the episode, and this is far from the last this season. They seem to love the phrase,
"Here endeth the lesson."
because it's been said before in the show.
Here endeth the lesson.
Here endeth the lesson.
Secondly, we'll find out that the reason the First has sprung its plan into action is because of Buffy's resurrection at the beginning of last season. I assume this is different from the last time Buffy was revived because it was mystical? I don't know how this throws the Slayer line out of whack exactly, because the Slayer line doesn't run through Buffy anymore, established when no other Slayer was called after her death in season 5. It's an attempt to tie everything together, but it only kinda half works. Rona is such a terrible addition to this show. I feel like I'm watching the show with someone who doesn't like it whenever she's around. She always second guesses everything Buffy says or does from day one. We already had this with Kennedy to a much more manageable degree, but this is subtlety thrown out the window. The episode is structured excellently though. The first act surrounds Eve being revealed as the First, the second with the gang preparing the arrival of the Turrican and their plan going wrong, with the final being Buffy's taking down of the creature. The First is now pretty concerned about Buffy's strength and will take a step back now to regroup, or so the show says. All we actually get to this effect is a stern look. Buffy and Spike begin training the potentials, letting them take on vampires and showing them where demons hang out. They eventually run into Clem again.
Just let me tell you this.
But the main focus of the episode is Dawn. Now wait a minute, because this one isn't like the last. Don't confuse a Dawn episode with a Dawn and her annoying high school friends episode. The two are actually quite different. While the latter consists of mainly aimless antics that result in no lesson really learned at the end, the former provides this child with much needed development. The Watchers Council come and alert Willow that a potential is currently residing in Sunnydale, unbeknownst to the gang. They do a spell to try and find the potential, which directs them towards Dawn, who starts to panic because she's now a potential. She remembers what the supposed apparition of Joyce said about Buffy not being there for her, and she interprets this as Buffy's death to allow her to become the Slayer. Again, the Slayer line doesn't run through Buffy, guys. Dawn sneaks out and runs into Amanda, a student that Buffy was counselling earlier in the day, and she talks about running into what sounds like a vampire at the school. Dawn decides to test her potential Slayer chops and goes with Amanda to the school to stake it. This doesn't pan out well, and the two are chased around the school by the vampire, who proves to be quite the challenge when your big sister Slayer isn't around to help. At the same time, Bringers smash through the windows and head for Amanda? They escape after setting the Bringers on fire, and Dawn gives Amanda her weapon, realising that she is the true potential, not her. The gang realise that Dawn is missing, and Willow does a locator spell to allow Buffy, Spike and Xander to find her and Amanda at the school. We learn that Amanda actually came to Buffy's house during the night for more guidance, because kids do that of course, and was behind the door when the light hit Dawn, which made the gang think it was Dawn. Amanda joins the gang at the house as Xander comforts a moping Dawn, who's now still a regular human being and not a potential. Xander can relate and does so in this fabulous scene.
You're not special. You're extraordinary.
Maybe that's your power.
What?
Seeing. Knowing.
This episode is one of the only Dawn episodes I like. Turns out that Buffy training Dawn in the first episode was almost foreshadowing to her training the potentials later in the season. Dawn uses this training and knowledge of her being a potential to good use, and doesn't do too bad a job for being on her own, and of course not actually being a potential. I like that they keep Dawn's loyalty for her sister by having her interpret the fake Joyce's message as Buffy's death, rather than Buffy's betrayal, because she could never see that being the case. For now. I'm actually starting to not dislike Dawn a lot, although she's still got a long way to go and we've only got half a season left, and that episode is coming up in the near future. You know the one. The one that almost ruins nearly every character in the final few episodes. Oh, I can't wait. Xander being the one to give the motivational speech to Dawn is a testament to his character development. He has a soft spot for Dawn, one which the comics make very... Ugh, I don't even want to go into that. This is the way these two characters should be, almost sibling-like. Rona continues to be severely unlikable, while Kennedy is actually probably my favourite of the potentials. She's not great, but she gets the most lines, and while she's still a novice, she has a sense of what's right and only questions Buffy when she thinks it might endanger them. Rona would complain if a seagull flew in the wrong direction. Andrew's no longer a prisoner for the team, now acting as the comic relief character, which he works best as. He's now an honorary member of the gang, and last season I mentioned that one of the trio would go on to join the gang. I also mentioned it was the wrong one. Although I actually like Andrew, it should have been Jonathan that was here. He should have been the one to join the gang. He's been there since season 2 and had his own moments where the show focuses on him, like in Earshot and Superstar, and this is all before he becomes a villain in season 6. He should have been the one to join the gang, not Andrew, but that's just my opinion. Giles states the potential's on a spiritual retreat, similar to Buffy in season 5. However, Kennedy claims she's ill and can't go. Willow finds that Kennedy isn't actually sick and she takes Willow out to the Bronze for a date where they begin to learn more about each other. In other news, Spike's chip is starting to malfunction and go off at random points. Buffy attempts to contact Riley for help, but only gets a flower store and no luck. I thought they had their email. Willow and Kennedy share their first kiss, which has a strange effect on Willow.
Well, that was nice.
Willow turns into Warren, which scares the gang, but she proves it's her by revealing some stories about Xander from kindergarten.
An incident involving Aquaman underoos, for example? You want me to start talking? Hey, Willow!
She leaves to get help to change back as Spike and Buffy head to the Initiative's old headquarters for something to help Spike. Hang on, I remember this line from Primeval, how about you?
The Initiative itself will be filled in with concrete.
Well, they just didn't do that, because now the Initiative is just sitting here with all of the dead bodies still in it. And as it turns out, one demon isn't dead and tracks Spike off to presumably feed from. While the A-plot and the B-plot are going on, now we have the C-plot, as Robson, who was last seen bleeding to death, calls the house because he's not dead, and tells him about how the last thing he saw was Giles about to be killed by a bringer. Anya, Xander, Dawn and Andrew begin panicking as they haven't seen Giles actually touch anyone or anything, and plus his whole Buffy might not be as great as we think talk from a few episodes ago, they begin to suspect he's actually the first evil. He couldn't drive there because he hadn't renewed his driver's license in America, but this could all be a ploy for the first to have the potentials all to itself in the desert to kill. They head out and rush the fake Giles.
Catch him! Catch him!
Oh, I feel him! I feel him!
Now, wait a minute. You think I'm evil if I bring a group of girls on a camping trip and don't touch them?
And it turns out Giles isn't evil, he's just been a prick since he's come back. Kennedy follows Willow to the old Wicca group at UC Sunnydale where they find that Amy is now a member. She tries to do a spell to reverse the effects which doesn't work and Willow slaps Amy, slowly realising that she's becoming Warren the longer she stays as him. Willow storms off as Kennedy has a conversation with Amy which ends with Kennedy realising that Amy is the one who did the spell on Willow to make her take the form of Warren because of her jealousy that Willow became evil and tried to end the world yet still got all her friends back. The Hex allows Willow to choose the form of her punishment in getting love, and Warren was the vessel she subconsciously chose, probably because she killed him. Buffy rescues Spike from the demon and they're discovered by a group of Riley's team, who give Buffy a decision.
This chip, we can either repair it or remove it.
Kennedy is suddenly transported to the back garden of Buffy's house as Willow Warren shows up, recreating Tara's murder. Kennedy tries to stop Willow from shooting her, as Willow comes to the conclusion that she didn't actually choose Warren because she killed him, but because he killed Tara, and she was guilty about moving on from Tara, not that she tried to end the world. In one of the most unintentionally hilarious scenes, Warren Willow goes from crying hysterically to completely calm only a few seconds later. I'm not kidding. It's literally like 5 seconds and he looks completely normal after bawling his eyes out. Kennedy does turn Willow back into herself by kissing her, showing that she can move on while still remembering Tara and making a place for her in her heart. A lot happens in this episode. I mentioned that Willow visited Tara's grave as a way to try and move on from her, but this hex takes effect because she forgot about her when she kissed Kennedy. This is reversed at the end when they kiss again and Willow finally does move on, remembering Tara but not punishing herself for moving on. Amy makes her final appearance here. She becomes a main villain in the comics with a skinless Warren or some crap that she saved at the last second between his skinning and death. Funnily enough, a reader reminded Joss Whedon, who helped come up with the plot for season 8, that Warren was technically dead since they first appeared as him, so it can't make sense that he never died, and Joss's response can be summed up to Oops. Giles is suspected to be the first, and as it turns out, he just came ridiculously close to death yet again. Let's see that last frame again. You're telling me he raised his hand to stop that at that point? It is a cool little thing to slip into the season because they genuinely made sure that Anthony Head didn't touch anything or anyone on set to make the audience themselves think back and question their own memory. And then here he is leaning on a kitchen counter. Of course, they would never kill Giles off in such a haphazard way, so he's not dead. Buffy is given the decision to replace or remove Spike's chip, and we don't know what she picks in this episode. However, whatever she picks will probably not go down well, knowing the show. It's this season's Xander episode, I guess. While this episode focuses on Xander for one half, the other is focused on Robin, so I'll classify it as the Xander episode even though he isn't always the main focus because this is the final season and he needs one, and the last one is not going to be Hell's Bells. Nope, not on my watch. The episode begins with Buffy telling Giles that she had Spike's chip removed as he attacks Giles because he was speculated to be the first and this chip doesn't go off. Giles isn't happy at this because of how Spike can be unpredictable even though he has a soul and won't sleep with Buffy because he also has a conscience now. He accuses Buffy of being blinded by her past relationship with him, incapable of sound judgment with him around as he could be activated by the first again and now can attack people with no repercussions even though that was already the case. After finding Robin with a shovel a few episodes back, Buffy goes snooping to see if there's anything indicating he's evil. He catches her and asks her out on a date. Buffy accepts in order to learn more about him. She also finds him dashingly attractive, which I suppose is a bonus. Xander runs into a girl named Lisa who's played by special guest Ashanti. Remember her? They also go out on a date which ends with Xander being held over the seal, bleeding, as Lisa is actually a servant of the first. And that's his part. This really isn't a Xander episode, is it? Run it back! Robin and Buffy get rushed by a group of vampires, and Robin showcases his excellent fighting skills to Buffy. They sit down for dinner, where Robin explains that his mother was a slayer, who was obviously killed when he was only 4 years old. He was taken in by her watcher and failed to find the vampire that killed his mother. He's something of a part-time demon hunter that made his way to Sunnydale purposefully to fight against the Hellmouth. Meanwhile at the house, Andrew is approached by the first in the form of Jonathan to try and get him to use the gun Willow bought last episode to kill the Potentials. Andrew tells Willow, Dawn, Anya and the Potentials as they make him wear a wire to learn more about the first plans. No, not that kind of wire. Well, actually, yeah, that kind of wire. The only thing the first says of any use is that it isn't Spike's time yet, whatever that means. Mostly, though, this idea doesn't work, and the first scares them for trying to trick it. Willow gets a text from Xander that indicates he's in trouble, and Spike fetches Buffy at the restaurant to rescue him. Robin tags along and discovers that Spike is a vampire when they fight off Lisa.
He's a vampire.
They take Xander home where they begin joking about Xander constantly attracting demon women ever since Mantis Woman in season 1. Giles interrupts and tells them all to stop messing around. Things are getting serious and they all need to focus. After finding out what the first said, Spike tells Buffy that he'll leave town before it can use him. Buffy tells him not to and that she isn't ready for him to not be around. They'll also need his strength for the battle ahead. In the final scene, Robin is visited by the first as his mother, Nikki Wood. It stirs up shit by telling Robin what vampire killed her.
You fought at his side.
Spike.
Remember back in Fool for Love? We saw Spike kill that Slayer in New York in 1977. That was Robin's mother. I like some aspects of this episode. The misdirection they do with Robin and Lisa is great. They make you think Robin is evil, even showing his impressive dagger collection, but it's actually Lisa that's the evil one. I like Spike's scene with Buffy during the middle of the episode when he finds out that she's going on a date, and he seems to have come to peace with the fact that he'll never have her. He got his soul back for her, not to be with her. Now the negatives, there's a lot more. The gang managed to catch the first on tape using a wire. This doesn't make a lot of sense, as the first usually only appears to the singular person or people it wants to communicate with to avoid being overheard. Would it really be this sloppy, or did it know all along since it can literally be anywhere and everywhere at the same time? Was it just toying with the gang when it mentioned Spike? Robin discovered Spike was a vampire in the basement. However, on their drive there, he looks at Spike in the rearview mirror suspiciously. He shouldn't have been able to see him.
He's a vampire.
To be fair, he doesn't sound too surprised. Was this a mistake, oversight, or simply unintentional? In that case, the direction should have been better. A new potential is introduced named Chawan.
Let's, go and put away your new clothes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present the only Asian character in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Giles is fastly becoming unlikable. Are we sure the first didn't actually kill him and replace him with a robot replicate? First, he draws ridiculously cartoon pictures to try and communicate what's happening with Chawan, and then goes on to tell the others that they're messing around by saving Xander and trying to learn more about the first. Okay, he might have a point about the whole date thing when the apocalypse is imminent. However, there's going to be a later episode that's going to make this all seem very hypocritical of Ghoul Rupert. I like the attempts to tie everything together with Robin's mother and Spike. They even throw in Snyder's grave as an Easter egg in one scene, which I like. It is quite a poor episode from Jane Espenson, which is unusual for her. She just tried to fit too much in here that the structure is all choppy and sloppy. The episode begins with a prophetic dream of both Chloe, one of the potentials, crying, and the first Slayer telling Buffy that what she's doing isn't enough. Meanwhile, Anya is attacked by the second demon assassin sent by Hoffram, which Spike kills. I'm serious, you think this is going to be a big storyline, but it doesn't happen. The effects of the Hellmouth are starting to be felt in the high school, and Robin begins working with the gang. He's taken to the house and gets an insight on the setup. The potentials are being trained by Kennedy, for some reason, who gives Chloe a hard time. Robin has his confrontation with Spike, beginning his waiting period for a chance to kill him. He gives Buffy a bag that was to be inherited from Slayer to Slayer, but Robin held on to it after his mother died as he'd grown attached to it. That night, Chloe is found in the bathroom, who's hung herself after being convinced by the first, who appears and taunts the gang, seeing how easy it was to make her do such a thing. Buffy proceeds to give the most out-of-line speech she's ever given.
Chloe was an idiot. She was weak. And anyone in a rush to be the next dead body I bury, it's easy. Just think of Chloe.
Even Willow struggles to back her up, and to make matters worse, she tells Spike he was a better warrior when he didn't have a soul. Like he shouldn't have gotten it? Buffy, what happened last episode when you told Spike you didn't want him to leave? What has Peachy done to Buffy here? This is out of character as all hell. They open the bag, which reveals a mystical shadow puppet set that opens a portal for Buffy to step through. She does, and a massive beast trades places with her, which throws Spike through the ceiling before running off. Spike does manage to kill it and return its body to the house, where they plan to send it back through the portal, retrieving Buffy in the process. Buffy, meanwhile, appears in front of 3 tribesmen who tell her how the first Slayer was made, chained to the earth to draw power from it by the 3 tribesmen. They offer Buffy strength and power, unlike any she's ever had, but because they're technically 3 kidnappers that doomed an entire line of girls to fight evil and die young, she refuses. For moral reasons, I suppose. I know they screwed her life up, but the first Slayer told her it wasn't enough. And she blamed Spike for not being as ruthless. Handed a solution, she turned it down. The tribesmen leave Buffy with a vision of what's to come as a parting gift. Meanwhile, Willow draws power from Kennedy and Anya to open the portal and bring Buffy back, which Kennedy is very taken aback by. It turns out that it wasn't something you'd almost like to see. Buffy tells Willow about the first Slayer's message in her dreams, and that she was right, as the vision she saw was... Why the fuck was that in there? It scared the shit out of me, and I've seen it like 3 times before this. This is a decent episode. I like that we learn more about the Slayer line and how it was created. However, everything else is at a standstill plot-wise. The first manages to convince the weakest-minded of the potentials to commit suicide, which is quite frightening. I'm not even sure of how much I'm allowed to show in this video, so I'm trying to edit around it to the best of my ability. And Buffy has that odd speech I talked about earlier, which probably kicks off the potentials' revolt, which we've previously seen with people like Rona and Kennedy. We get a nice tease of what's to come with that army of Turricans below the Hellmouth, just itching to be free. Robin officially joins the gang for the battle ahead, but his efforts are more focused on Spike at the moment to avenge the death of his mother. He'll be waiting for the perfect moment to strike over the next few episodes, but overall, this episode has its moments. The documentary episode is a trope that almost all American shows tackle at some point. They're usually really hit or miss, but the main premise is having a real canonical camera in the show which the characters have to interact with. If you have a strong cast or a unique twist on this premise, sometimes that's enough to carry it. But to give an example of another show I plan to cover on Episodic Analysis, ER did its documentary episode completely live, twice on each side of the coast, so any fuck-ups had to be incorporated into the performance, like a stage play. This episode centres around Andrew filming a documentary of Buffy's battle against the First. He talks directly to the camera, points to the viewer, which can result in some great moments, especially when he explains backstories and usually they're overdramatic or completely inaccurate. At the high school, the effects of the Hellmouth are being felt, with disappearing students and exploding heads. Buffy checks out the seal with Robin, who gets possessed by the First while standing on it, accusing her of sleeping with Spike, although he retains no memory of this after Buffy snaps him out of it. Andrew interviews Xander and Anya, prying into their personal business such as the wedding, which results in the two privately making up from the whole situation, which Andrew films on a hidden camera.
We fit together great.
Yeah, sometimes I want to be back in your life.
I hope you know you never left my heart.
There's a great moment he has with Spike too.
Throw it out and eat it.
Spike, the light was kind of behind you.
Oh, right. This better then?
Being interrogated by the gang as being the first person to pour blood onto the seal, he recounts how himself and Jonathan returned to Sunnydale near the start of the season and how the First approached him with the idea to kill Jonathan so that they could all become gods.
We are gods, oh, we are gods. We're as gods, we are as gods.
The knife he used is inspected and Willow researches for an answer on how they could possibly reverse the seal's power, if just for the moment. Later that night, Buffy takes Andrew to the seal along with Robin and Spike, and they discover some newly made bringers, which Buffy fights off. Completely unrelated to this, Anya and Xander sleep together as a sort of last hurrah. Let's see how long this lasts. Robin tries to stake Spike during a brawl with some students possessed by the seal. Buffy tells Andrew that the only way to stop the seal is to pour his blood onto it. This causes Andrew to cry, revealing that he knew all along it wasn't Warren that told him to kill Jonathan, but that he wanted it to be, so he believed it all. As his tears hit the seal, it seems to quell the seal and all the students return to normal. There were no plans for her to kill Andrew. Willow must have found that the tears of the first person to spill blood on it were the answer. I assume that's something poetic. The episode ends with Andrew telling the camera that he'll more than likely die in the fight against the First and that he probably deserves to, ending his documentary. Fun episode. I know that Andrew is a character that the fanbase can't seem to come to a consensus on. He's either love him or hate him, and I find myself falling on the love him side. He's a good character, despite what I said about him with regards to Jonathan being the one who should have joined the gang. Andrew clearly had feelings for Warren. Whether he was in love with him or not is kind of left ambiguous, like Andrew's sexuality. You get the impression he's gay, or I guess that was the intention. Warren took advantage of his affection and involved him in the murder/attempted rape of Katrina, which he was hesitant to say was cool when they got away with it. The First used Warren to persuade Andrew to kill Jonathan, which Andrew knew wasn't Warren. He merely wanted it to be because he missed him. At the end of the episode, he talks about needing to take responsibility for what happened to him and that if he doesn't die in the battle, he'll turn himself in. He's a good guy that was manipulated into becoming evil by the man he felt affection for. Now that he's gone and he's realised the repercussions of his actions, he fights for good because it's who he is. I don't mind that they give him his own episode, as it allows him to fully cross over to the good side with the ambiguous is he good or evil question finally answered. Besides that, Kennedy and Willow make up after Kennedy admits how freaked she was about Willow going a bit dark last episode. That thrilling arc lasted an episode. Xander and Anya sleep together again as the writers begin their infamous backstep routine that they've enjoyed doing when it comes to romance arcs in the past on this show. I like that the two finally reconcile after the wedding, and this is the result of it. They do both still love each other, so I suppose it's not far-fetched that they would jump into bed again given the chance, but I digress. The episode begins in 1977 as we see Spike fight Nikki Wood in Central Park. Through Robin's help at distracting Spike, Nikki is able to make it out alive this time. Cut to the present and Spike saves Robin's life during a vampire fight they encounter alongside Buffy. Giles returns for the first time since First Date, where he's been to see the Coven, who've given him something which might help them understand more about what triggers Spike into a killing machine for the first time, and hopefully disable said trigger. Buffy and Giles disagree on what to do with Spike, as Buffy wants to disable it, but Giles wants to play it safe and get rid of him. Guess which side Robin is on? They head to the basement and perform the spell which awakens this bug creature that crawls into Spike's brain and allows us to see more of Spike's backstory. I mentioned in my Season 5 video that there was a crucial part of Spike's life as William that we were yet to see. This was the very close relationship he had with his mother. She was sickly and William looked after her. She would comfort him by singing the same song early one morning that the First had been singing to Spike. This activates the trigger, scaring the gang. Willow receives a phone call from Fred over on Angel to help them reinsole Angelus, who's loose in Los Angeles. She informs Buffy without telling her why and that she'll need to leave for the next few days. Convenient that the First chooses not to attack while she's away. Willow leaves and Robin has a private conversation with Giles where he convinces him that killing Spike is for the good of the entire gang. He also learns that Spike killed Robin's mother and that despite the fact this would make it very clear that this is purely for revenge, they make a plan to go behind Buffy's back with Giles distracting Buffy so Robin can kill Spike. Giles does so as Robin takes Spike to his private shed covered in crosses and Robin plays the song on iTunes, God Rest Its Soul, to activate Spike's trigger. During the fight, Spike has another flashback of turning his mother into a vampire after Drew sired him so that he can be with her forever. She wasn't his mother, however, and attacked him both verbally and physically, and Spike was forced to stake his mother. Reliving this experience, he comes to an epiphany. He resented his mother since that moment for the things she said that night, but he realises that it wasn't her, it was the demon, and this renders the trigger useless and he knocks Robin down. He proves to Robin that the trigger doesn't work and then informs him he's going to kill him. Buffy realises that Giles is stalling her while Spike is being killed and she rushes to Robin's shed. I'm guessing she tracked his scent or already knew what it was and finds that Spike didn't kill Robin and lets him away with a warning just this once, but that he'll kill him if he tries anything again. Buffy interrogates Robin, disappointed in him that he let a vendetta get in the way of the most important war they'll ever fight, and that she'll let Spike kill him if he tries anything again. In the final scene, Giles tries to explain his actions to Buffy after finding out that Robin failed to kill Spike, but Buffy says one of the most shocking lines of the show.
You need to learn.
No. I think you've taught me everything I need to know.
This still shocks me, that they do an episode like this, with such little time left to make up for it. Giles' character is under so much scrutiny from this moment. He's so quick to help Robin, even though it undermines Buffy's authority. I don't understand why, because they just put the bug thing in Spike's head, he's so impatient to just let it take effect. Because it does, and the trigger is deactivated, making both Giles and Robin seem like amateurs. For Robin, this is an in-character moment. Another nice viewer dilemma, as you understand why he's so hell-bent on staking Spike. He killed his mother. However, circumstances circumstances mean that they need his power and strength for the battle ahead. This is so out of character for Giles. All he has done since coming back into the story is questions Buffy's decisions and ability, like the fucking potentials. This is a supportive adult role for Buffy. Why does he turn on her? And it's not over yet. There's going to be a further attempt to assassinate his character in a few episodes' time. Oh, I can't wait for that episode. We understand that the first used a deep memory within Spike's mind that reminded him of what he believed his mother really thought of him, until he comes to the conclusion that it was just the vampire in her and not who she truly was. Spike's trigger is now deactivated, and Robin ceases any plans to try and stake Spike for the rest of the show. This also ends any romantic ties between Buffy and Robin, as Spike is their strongest ally. Her only focus now is the war, which Giles claims she's lost sight of. She shuts him out at the end of the episode in a heartbreaking moment that Giles fucking deserves, in my opinion. Willow heads out to help Angel investigations, and she's going to also bring back a familiar face with her to assist in the war. All in all, I love the Spike backstory, and Robin's vendetta being explored more and concluding. But Giles, oh dear, he's been one of my absolute favourite characters in the show, but this is unacceptable. This episode is actually David Fury's final writing credit, who's a writer I've never had much of a personal feeling towards, unlike others. However, taking a look at the episodes he's written, like Helpless, Primeval, Crush, and Grave, he's been an integral part in the development of this show. We'll hear from him again and actually see him in Angel's 5th season, but I had to pay my respects to the effort this guy put into this show. The final arc of the show kicks off in this episode as several new characters are introduced. The first is Caleb, a misogynistic priest who captures a potential, claiming that he's in league with the First. He gives the girl a message before stabbing her and throwing her out of a moving vehicle. Yep, that's a great plan. There's totally no possibility of her dying from that. It's for Willow, who's driving back from LA behind them.
This girl's bleeding badly. We have to get her to the hospital.
Yep. Guess I'm back in Sunnydale.
Willow and Faith take the girl to the hospital, and Faith heads off to find the gang. She runs into Spike, who meets Faith for the first time, although technically they met in Season 4's Who Are You? However, Faith was Buffy at that point. Buffy catches up with them and takes Faith back to the house, who gets an awkward greeting from Giles and Dawn, who we've never seen meet Faith before, and there's an obvious history we know nothing about. At the high school, Buffy and Robin make up after the last episode, agreeing that the fight against the First is more important. Robin fires Buffy so that she can focus on the battle.
Couldn't I just come to work part-time? I could make flyers for encounter groups and post them up all over the school.
And you're fired again.
Faith and Spike have a conversation where they find they have a lot in common. Spike learns about meeting Faith before, and Faith learns about Buffy and Spike's relationship. Buffy comes in and shows obvious jealousy before being called to the hospital as that girl has somehow survived, and relays the message that Caleb had for her.
He said, I have something of yours.
Buffy prepares the potentials to head in and storm Caleb's hideout, as she doesn't think he'll be expecting a full assault this soon. Others are sceptical of this plan, and of course Giles is at the forefront of this scepticism.
You don't even know what this man has of yours, if he in fact has anything.
It could be a girl, a potential trying to get to us.
Could be a stapler.
While Faith and Buffy locate Caleb's hideout at a vineyard, Rona continues to criticise Buffy's leadership, and Xander has one of the best speeches in the show.
I've seen her heart, and this time not literally. And I'm telling you right now, she cares more about your lives than you will ever know.
Buffy and Faith catch the end of this as they begin their assault. Caleb is prepared for them, revealing that the message was a trap to try and kill as many potentials as he can.
Slayer must indeed be powerful. So, what else you got?
He knocks Buffy and Spike out of the way like it's nobody's business. He kills a few potentials.
No!
Yes.
Faith is knocked unconscious, Rona's arm is broken, and Molly is killed. Buffy tells Xander to organise a retreat. But hang on a minute, that's not Xander. No, I'm serious, that is totally the other Xander from The Replacement. I guess Nicholas Brendon wasn't available for that shot? Xander starts hustling the potentials out as Faith is carried to safety.
You're the one who sees everything, aren't you? Well, let's see what we can do about that.
Xander's eye is gouged out as the gang then completes the retreat. The episode ends with all of the potentials and Xander in the hospital as Buffy watches on, in defeat. Oh boy. So much to discuss. Firstly, Faith returns to Sunnydale for the first time since Season 4, now a completely reformed character. If you've only ever watched Buffy, this might confuse you as most of her character development happens on Angel. I'll do a quick recap of that arc now, as I know some of the people who watch this analysis haven't seen Angel. Faith tries to kill Angel in Season 1, and after torturing poor Wesley for being a bad watcher, she breaks down and seeks rehabilitation. She goes to prison, and Angel visits her over the course of the next few seasons to cheer her on in her quest for redemption. After Angel loses his soul in Season 4, Wesley informs Faith and she breaks out of prison to take temporary charge of Angel investigations, honing her leadership skills as Wesley acts as her watcher again, this time making up for the mess he made in season 3 of Buffy. She successfully tricks Angelus into biting her while she's injected with a mystical drug, and they go on a mind walk together through Angel's backstory. She wakes up after Angel is reinstalled by Willow, similar to season 2 of Buffy, and the two head to Sunnydale. Most of her screen time in this episode is spent alongside Spike in preparation for a Faith spin-off, which was all ready to be greenlit and began filming at the conclusion of Buffy, where Faith and Spike would travel around together to other Hellmouths. This spin-off, which they spent so much time setting up, never ended up happening, as Eliza Dushku declined for several reasons. Firstly, she believed that the show would be compared too much to Buffy, and would more than likely live in its shadow, which she didn't want to do. Secondly, she signed up to play the lead in a show called True Calling, which was on Fox, a bigger network, and because it was on Fox, it also got cancelled halfway through its second season. I watched it out of curiosity, and it's not bad to be honest, I quite liked it. She's good in it, and Jason Priestley is always a treat. It's good to have Faith back, now reformed and acting for good. Robin and Buffy make up and share a conversation where Robin convinces Buffy to push the potentials to do more in preparation for the battles ahead, as Buffy doesn't think they're ready, and rightfully so. She obviously leads him into a trap at Caleb's, but what I don't understand is why so many people are against this plan. Buffy needs to test and train them, and although it might not be the best circumstances, what is? Remember the last character whose only experience was under controlled circumstances? Xander is the only one who trusts Buffy's judgment, which ends up backfiring as he loses an eye. This was foreshadowed by Dawn in Potential when she said,
Maybe that's your power.
What?
Seeing.
There's actually a lot more to this moment than originally planned. It's common knowledge that Xander was supposed to be killed off here. He's the only one who backs Buffy, and after his death, Buffy is left with no one to back her up. For reasons I assume have to do with another character dying in the finale, they didn't want to overdo the character deaths, so didn't go through with it. It's a shame because I wouldn't have minded Xander dying here, as it makes the next episode make a whole lot more sense once you know that that was the original plan. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Nicholas Brendan actually approached the writers during season 7's development for them to write a romance storyline between Buffy and Xander. While the writers bandied about with this idea, they also didn't go through with it. People seem to agree this was a good decision, but the original idea for season 2 of the show was to have a season-long love triangle between Buffy, Angel and Xander. They even took these promo images to this effect, and implemented teases in the early episodes like Buffy's dance with Xander at the Bronze to make Angel jealous. I wouldn't have actually minded a Buffy and Xander love story for the final season, as Buffy doesn't have anyone, and Xander has always felt affection towards Buffy. Anya even recognised this and mentioned it during the musical episode.
When things get rough, he just hides behind his Buffy. Now look, he's getting huffy, cause he knows that I know.
And I know I'm in the minority with this, but if they were looking to bring things full circle, most of season 1 was spent with Xander falling for Buffy, only stopping when she turned him down in Prophecy Girl. Caleb is introduced, played by the ever-delightful Nathan Fillion. This was probably to promote Firefly without mentioning it, as Gina Torres, another Firefly cast member, played a villain in Angel around the same exact time. He's a servant of the First, and it's revealed to the viewer that he's responsible for the death of the Watchers' Council earlier in the season, and organised the very first Bringer attacks of the season. He's very misogynistic, and it's implied that he used to be a serial killer that was never caught, and despite all of this, oh my god, he's given so many great lines.
Well, you're the other one, aren't you? The Cain to her Abel? No offense meant to Cain, of course.
They really play into this sexism thing, and Fillion says all of his lines like Mr. Rogers, which creates this unique and great love-to-hate villain for the final arc of the show. Breaking Rona's arm has definitely moved him up on the character rankings for me. Let's just make some room here. Get rid of that. There we go. Buffy realises she was wrong to go in guns blazing at the end of the episode, resulting in one of the gang's lowest ever moments. Surely she'll never make this mistake again, right? Oh, Drew. Oh, Drew, this is unbelievable. First he writes him. That's one strike. The Killer in Me wasn't too bad, that was fine. And now comes his final episode, the infamous Empty Places. Oh, Drew. Willow and Giles get some information on Caleb from the police department, and Buffy divides this up as the gang enter research mode. The Potentials begin taking a shine to Faith, finding their studies boring, although with Anya and Andrew as your teachers, I seriously don't believe that's possible. Buffy heads to the school to pick up the rest of her belongings, where she runs into Caleb, and he kicks the shit out of her again, just for the hell of it I suppose. Through research, Giles discovers a mark that looks like one Caleb was sporting on his ring in a crime scene photograph of a local church, although how they know this? I don't know. Giles decides to send Spike on this mission, not Faith, and forces Andrew to go with him to learn more about Caleb's connection to this church. Faith takes the Potentials to the Bronze for some time off, which Giles allows, and... Wait, Giles allows?
Faith thought that the girls could do with some time off their studies. I thought...
You hypocritical backstabbing old dunce. You sent away Spike, the strongest ally you have, and had Faith take all of the Potentials out of the safety of the house to the Bronze, where the police show up and attempt to attack Faith for the distress she's caused since breaking out of prison in LA. Is that Billy? I swear to God, that's Billy from Angel. The potentials are shot at with a shotgun. Yes, this is all very safe. And they disarm him to help Faith fight off the other officers, probably thanks to the training Buffy has put them through. Buffy arrives at the Bronze and gets into an argument with Faith.
Let him mess up sometimes, get down and dirty. How the hell else are they gonna learn?
Oh, so she agrees with Buffy.
Hey, what about the vineyard? How safe were they when you dragged them off to meet Caleb?
Or not. She just shot herself in the foot, or punched in the face as Buffy does so at that comment. Meanwhile, Spike and Andrew...
Well, see, the genius of it is you soak it in ice water for an hour so it holds its shape. And you deep fry it, root side up for about 5 minutes. Masterful.
They head to the church and learn that Caleb attacked the priest there at the church when he uncovered an ancient message with a meaning he didn't like.
It is not for thee. It is for her alone to wield.
As it turns out, Caleb does have something of Buffy's, something which he can't use, most likely a weapon of some sorts. Robin runs into Faith on his way to the meeting and the two seem to hit it off. Buffy announces to the gang, including a now eye-patched Xander, that she plans to go back to the vineyard, believing that Caleb does have something of hers after looking at the plans of the building, uncovering an entire basement that they're yet to explore. The gang aren't big on this plan and turn against Buffy. So just the potentials, right?
We are clearly demonstrating that we are not together on this.
Oh, well, of course he pipes up, but Anya wouldn't stand for this.
You really do think you're better than we are?
No,
But we don't know. We don't know if you're actually better.
Right. Well, Willow's always got Buffy's back. She's seen her stop countless apocalypses.
With everything that's happened, I'm worried about your judgment.
Are you serious? What about Dawn, her sister?
So I need you to leave. Sorry.
Oh no. Buffy is kicked out of the fucking house and Faith is put in charge, even though she led the fucking potentials into a gunfight with the emergency services. Faith tries to apologise.
Whether you wanted it or not, their lives are yours.
Fuck this episode. Seriously, what made them think that doing this with just 3 episodes left to go was a good idea? I have nothing against questioning Buffy's leadership. She fucked up. She knows she did. But kicking her out of the battle, turning on her, during the most important battle of their lives when she's proven herself not just once, not just twice, not just thrice, not just thrice, not just twice, not just sice, not just 7 times, not just 8 times, but at least 9 times. But still, oh, she can't be trusted. She fucked up once, a few people died, which we knew was going to happen. Robin was the one who told Buffy to push the potentials, but as soon as they start ganging up on her, he's busy trying to catch some poontang to Kea. Xander loses his eye, so it might be understandable that he's hesitant to agree with this, but he said it himself last episode. He believed in her completely, no matter what. Had he died as supposedly originally planned, this might make his silence in this scene make a lot more sense. It also might help understand why Anya is also so outspoken too. Dawn has been a loose cannon when it comes to treating Buffy with any kind of decency for a long time now, but of course, not just Xander losing his eye, but that vision of her mother telling her that Buffy wouldn't choose her, that probably somewhat influenced her decision in kicking Buffy out. Has nobody told her this was the fucking first yet? I haven't said it yet this video, so I'll say it now. Fuck off. Willow has stood by Buffy for the entire show, yet has been struggling to stand by her in recent episodes. She agrees that kicking Buffy out is the right idea, and the only stretch of reasonability I could find for this decision, besides Kennedy's overbearing control of the poor woman, is the mistrust that was shown in Same Time, Same Place, and that she was timid the gang wouldn't fully accept her back after her dark turn in season 6. We see Xander and Buffy debate the possibility of not being able to control her after finding the skinned body. This is about the only thing I can think of. Giles purposefully sends Spike away instead of Faith so that he's not there when they decide to confront Buffy about storming the vineyard. This is the man who trained her, has been her father figure for years. Everything she has learned about saving the world has come from his teachings. After his departure in season 6, which was already out of character, they bring him back in this season. And I just wish they killed him when he was still likeable at the end of season 6. He accuses Buffy of not focusing on the mission and teaching the potentials right because she's busy being out on a date. So he then gets mad when Buffy makes a tough call to train the potentials in battle and he actively lets them party at the Bronze. He gets mad at Buffy for acting recklessly, so he then joins the gang in doing something reckless by kicking out the most experienced leader they have and putting a complete novice in charge whose only experience was for a few days, canonically less than a week before this episode, in LA, which ended with her in a mystical coma. Only now they all start questioning her leadership when she's been in charge for 7 years. Remember when she sacrificed herself to save the world? And the only thing that allowed the first to come forward and begin its attack on the Slayer line was the fucking rest of them? This is so Ridiculous. They should have had Buffy make several other bad calls, each one slightly worse than the last, ending with the vineyard. The potentials didn't take to Buffy because they just didn't, and that rubbed off on the gang. That's it. One fuck up, albeit a big fuck up, which Buffy shouldn't have been so hasty to do given her experience, but it doesn't define her as a leader. Of course, the show will do a U-turn on this with 3 episodes left to go in the entire show, but this leaves such a sour taste because it's right at the end. So it's going to be one of the first things you remember thinking back to the ending. What the fuck else happened in this episode again? Oh yeah, Buffy is proved right by what Spike and Andrew find, but of course they're not there to tell the rest of the gang that, so it means nothing until next episode. It's also revealed that the Turricans can be staked. Apparently Buffy just didn't try hard enough when trying to kill this creature she'd never seen before and wasn't aware of its strength. It's just a retcon for the finale, that's all this is. I'm really disappointed with this arc so far, and I can't blame Drew Greenberg entirely, but he fucking stuck his name on this willingly, so if I'm going to place blame, it's going to be there. You seriously know you fucked up when my favourite characters are a former rapist killer, a current serial killer, and Andrew. So guess what? The gang are in turmoil, deciding what to do next. Faith, now the elected leader, plans to kidnap a bringer and make it talk to find out more about the first plan.
I'm not sure this is such a good idea.
Oh, shut the fuck up, you already think you know better and you wanted her in charge. They do kidnap one of them and take it back to the house when Spike and Andrew get back. Oh fucking hell, you two have missed a hell of a lot. They break the news to Spike, who understandably flips out in a great scene where he lets them all have it.
She has saved your lives again and again. She has died for you.
Faith tries to take Spike on when he accuses her of taking what's Buffy's again, and the two fight briefly before Spike leaves to find Buffy. In the basement, the gang uses a spell to make the bringer talk, as its tongue has been cut out. How does it eat? Anyway, it talks through Andrew, revealing that the bringers are making weapons of some kind. That's handy. And Giles slits its throat. Giles and Faith make a plan to begin searching the sewers beneath the vineyard for these weapons. They're literally doing Buffy's fucking plan. Okay. Giles seems to be more comfortable around Faith because she still has things to learn while Buffy doesn't. You're never going to replace Wesley.
That's why your friends turned on you in Sunnydale? Why the Watchers Council tried to kill you? No one trusts you, Faith. You're a rabid dog who should have been put down years ago!
That guy knew how to pump Faith up for a battle. Spike finds Buffy at a random house and they share an absolutely superb scene where Buffy begins to actually question her abilities as a leader thanks to the gang, and Spike kneels down before her to convince her otherwise, echoing the same speech she gave him in Never Leave Me.
100+ years. And there's only one thing I've ever been sure of. You.
They cuddle up together per Buffy's request. Faith is approached by the first, taking the form of the mayor, to try and convince Faith that Buffy is dangerous and will try to kill her for kicking her out. Robin walks in during this and Faith comes clean about the first talking to her. They connect over their wanting of comfort in these troubled times, and how out of league they feel compared to everyone else's experiences with stopping apocalypses, and this leads to a sex scene. Willow and Kennedy sleep together after Kennedy quells Willow's fears of turning darker into Warren like last time. This kicks off a sex scene that combines Faith and Robin's sessions in one room with Willow and Kennedy, which was actually the first ever lesbian sex scene on American network television. And Xander and Anya. If you're wondering why I'm not showing any of this, it's not because it's too spicy or whatever, but my DVD copy cuts it out. No, I'm not kidding, watch this.
I envy them.
Oh, that was subtle. This has to be cut out, but that really terrible sex scene between Riley and Buffy in Season 4 was apparently fine. I'd argue that it's just as explicit as this one. Here's the HD remaster that I totally didn't screen record for this one part to show you that Xander and Anya do indeed sleep together again. I said they would do a backstep on this last season because neither of them have any other established love interest. In the morning, Spike finds that Buffy left during the night to confront Caleb. Her confidence restored after Spike's speech, and she manages to evade his attacks for long enough to get her chance to head into the basement. There she finds an axe lodged inside a rock that she seems to feel some sort of feeling from. As she smiles, just the sight of it. More on that next episode. Faith and the Potentials fight off some bringers, finding what looks like a weapons chest in the sewers, which is actually...
Everybody get down!
So the gang decide to go through with Buffy's plans of returning to the vineyard, although make the mistake of going into the sewers rather than the vineyard's actual basement section, which is where the real treat lies. This red axe is actually a scythe, even though it looks nothing like a scythe. It's got some sort of link to the Slayer line. This scythe first made appearances in the comics, most notably Frey, written by Whedon about a Slayer from the future who uses his scythe as a weapon. Frey actually makes an appearance in the Buffy comics set after the show, and the scythe ends up crossing through different timelines and complete nonsense to get to that point in the future to reach Frey. You don't need to know any of this for this to make sense in the show, but it's an Easter egg for the comic readers. Faith takes control of the Potentials, leading them into danger similar to Buffy, and we'll see the fallout of this next episode. I want to take this time to note some similarities between this season of Buffy and the accompanied 4th season of Angel, which ran alongside it. There are an eerie amount of comparisons to make between these two seasons story-wise, and I haven't seen anyone talk about it at length online. Both shows centre around a villain taking the form of former/current characters to further its plan. The first on Buffy, and Jasmine on Angel. Both stories have the characters obsess over a phrase.
From beneath you, it devours.
Answer, Samundi.
Faith comes in to take temporary charge of the team, and a Firefly cast member comes in for the final 5 episodes to play a villain. Let's not forget annoying characters, which Angel thankfully only has one of that season. I just realised how that clip is going to seem so strange to the people who haven't seen the Angel videos. Willow and Kennedy finally sleep together, solidifying their relationship as Willow's final of the show. Her happy ending, so to speak. Same with Xander and Anya, and Faith gets her own love interest for the first time. Do we count the Xander fling in the Zeppo? I don't count it. She connects with Robin, they form a bond here, even if it takes some convincing over the next 2 episodes. This is Rebecca Rankirshner's last episode, who's had a bit of a mixed bag of episodes since joining the writing team in season 5. On one hand, she wrote the brilliant Tabula Rasa, and on the other, she helped ruin Xander and Anya's relationship with Hell's Bells. The rest are all fine, and I suppose if you can get away with only 1 bad episode after 3 seasons, that's not a bad record for the later writers on this show. Caleb taunts Buffy when she comes across the scythe.
Because the question now, girly girl, is can you pry it from solid rock before I come over there?
The first tells Caleb to let Buffy go with it, which annoys the fuck out of Caleb who wants to kill her now, but there's very good reason for this, as we'll see later. Back at the house, the gang return from looking for Buffy as Giles also notes that the Potentials haven't come back either. How did that end again? Yep, Faith does the exact same thing that Buffy did, and that was lead the Potentials into a trap. Some survive, which are the ones whose names have been established, and they try to carry the unconscious Faith to safety. They're surrounded by Turricans, which is when Buffy shows up with the scythe and saves them. When they return to the house, the Potentials decide that Buffy should probably be the leader again, considering she found the scythe and not the bomb, like Faith did. Buffy shares a conversation with Xander where she gives him instructions to a plan that we aren't fully clued in on just yet. What's the secret plans this episode? Xander and Donna looking for something outside in the car.
I don't leave crossbows around all willy-nilly. Not since that time when Miss Kitty Fantastico.
She killed the fucking cat. That's it, Xander, take her out. Okay, what actually happened was that Buffy didn't want Dawn to risk her own life trying to save the world, so that she can live on. And since Xander is one-eyed now, his aim and depth perception isn't great, so he agrees to take Dawn out of Sunnydale. Dawn doesn't accept this and tases Xander, driving them back. Caleb and the first do a merging ritual, which explains how Caleb has such great strength. Faith and Buffy make up, where Faith finally admits that she was jealous of what Buffy had, her friends, support, relationships. She also confesses about sleeping with Robin, which helps the two bond over how lonely it is being the leader, even if they're with someone or have people around them. They become detached, just to cope with the fact that they could die any moment in the fight against evil. Spike and Buffy talk next, where Spike tells Buffy that he's actually scared of what's coming next, as that night he spent just lying next to her, holding her, was the best of his entire life. Andrew and Anya head to the hospital for more medical supplies. They also have a touching conversation where Anya talks about humans.
When it's something that really matters, they fight. They never quit.
Then they have a wheelchair fight. Willow and Giles do some research on the scythe and find out its origins are rooted in Egypt. Buffy takes the scythe to this Egyptian-looking pyramid in one of the cemeteries she's patrolled for the past few years, finding a woman who claims to be the last of a group called the Guardians. The Guardians are the Slayer's true watchers, who forged the scythe specifically to kill the last pure demon on Earth centuries ago. Now, Buffy must use it for the final battle on the Hellmouth.
An end is truly near.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part on account of her neck snapping and all. Did she say the end is near or here?
The Guardian is suddenly killed by Caleb, who goes a bit crazy with his new strength and almost gets the best of Buffy.
Hey!
Angel shows up, saving her, and Buffy slices Caleb with the scythe, seemingly killing him. Buffy and Angel share a passionate kiss, where we find in the shadows that the first is there with Spike in an attempt to make him turn on them. So Angel returns to the show for the final 2 episodes. His last appearance was in Season 5's Forever when he came to comfort Buffy after her mother's death. They did technically meet off-screen in Season 6, which was the last time these two met, which didn't end well as far as we know. On Angel, Angel was informed about the apocalypse coming by Wolfram and Hart, who gave Angel a medallion, which Buffy was going to need for the final fight, although why we still don't know. The first gets up to more tricks as it lets Buffy go with the scythe for multiple reasons. Caleb was growing weaker, so another merge was needed to strengthen him. It also knew that Angel was going to turn up, probably because Wolfram and Hart are involved, and of course want the apocalypse to happen so that they can thrive as their business is built on evil. The first takes advantage of this by showing Spike their kiss, and since Buffy would probably figure out to come here for answers, it knew where this was all going to go down, explaining Caleb's ambush. Buffy returns to lead the gang for the final episode, concluding the terrible arc just in time for the finale. I always felt a bit bad for Faith. She did her best with only little experience as a leader, which was obviously going to pale in comparison to Buffy. There's a big moment for her character when she admits her jealousy towards Buffy's life, which Buffy had accused her of for seasons, most notably after she tried to sleep with Riley. The Guardians are unveiled as a group of ancient mystical beings which watch over the Slayer. This woman is the last on Earth and provides some explanation for the scythe, which has a powerful essence to it, being used to rid the world of pure demons before the arrival of human beings. I always liked Anya Anya and Andrew's little scenes in this episode where they take the time to have a bit of harmless fun. It ends up being the last that any characters will have before the fight, signifying that these two characters, though once killers, are willing to save the world and are still human at the bottom of it all. This is the final writing credits for both Douglas Petrie and Jane Espenson. The episode was supposed to be written by Marty Noxon, but she was tied up writing for a new show. Douglas Petrie joined the team in season 3, working his way up from story editor to co-executive producer in the final season. He wrote great episodes such as Fall for Love, This Year's Girl, No Place Like Home, and 2 to Go. Jane Espenson has been one of my favourite writers on the show, joining the team at the same time as Petrie, usually committed to writing some of the more comedic episodes, which is the essence of the show itself. Episodes like Band Candy, Superstar, The Replacement, I Was Made to Love You, and one of my favourites, Same Time, Same Place. She would go on to write for the next few seasons of Buffy comics before writing for many other shows. The contributions from these two have been superb to the show. But now, it's time. The final episode. Angel begins filling in Buffy on why he's arrived in Sunnydale, and that's to help Buffy fight the First.
Are you ready to finish this, bitch?
Okay, first, Caleb isn't dead. Buffy actually kills him for real this time by chopping him in half with the scythe.
Okay, now I'm pissed. Where is he?
He had to split.
Angel has done some research on the amulet and discovered that it can only be used by someone with a soul, something that's more than human. He offers his services, but Buffy turns him away, as in case they fail, the First will likely spread its attacks, and she'll need a second front in the form of Angel investigations. Angel mentions how he can smell Spike all over her and finds out about the relationship, as well as Spike's soul.
You know, I started it. The whole having a soul. Before it was all the cool new thing.
Oh my god, are you 12?
I'm getting a brush off for Captain Peroxide.
They do part on good terms though, with Angel suggesting there could be a future for them down the line.
Be a long time coming. Years if ever.
I ain't getting any older.
Buffy goes home, where Dawn is back and Buffy concedes, allowing her to fight in the battle. She has a conversation with Spike, who immediately comes clean to seeing her kiss Angel. He takes the medallion as an ensouled creature and becomes the champion for the battle. The First plan to make him turn on Buffy having failed. Buffy stays with Spike that night but is awoken by the First in the form of Caleb, who gives Buffy one last taunt, even changing into her.
There's that word again. What you are. How you'll die. Alone. I just realized something. Something that really never occurred to me before. We're gonna win.
Buffy fills in the gang on her plan to take down the First, which the audience doesn't actually hear, and while they are all a bit flabbergasted, they agree that it's a great idea. In preparation for the battle, Robin and Faith have a conversation where they agree that if they both survive the battle, they'll try dating. Some of the gang are too wired to sleep during the night, so they play Dungeons and Dragons.
Could it possibly get uglier? I used to be a highly respected watcher, and now I'm a wounded dwarf with the mystical strength of a doily.
The next morning, they all pile into a school bus heading to Sunnydale High. Before kicking the planet to action, the gang all begin to converse, possibly for the last time. Andrew tries to give a farewell and thank you speech, which would be really funny if Tom Link didn't look right at the camera for a second and take me out of the show. Anya drags him off as they defend one post of the school. Dawn gets ready to set up her post for her and Xander and refuses to say goodbye to her sister.
Anything you say is gonna sound like goodbye.
The OG4 are all that's left and share a fantastic conversation reminiscent of their talk at the end of The Harvest.
Oh, you could go with the full black secret agent look.
Or the puffy shirt, pirate /
The Earth is definitely doomed.
I was thinking of a more subtle approach, you know, like excessive not studying.
The Earth is doomed.
Giles heads to his post with Robin as Xander and Willow do the same for their parts of the plan. The Slayers, Potentials and Spike all bleed on the seal, opening the Hellmouth and climbing inside. They are met with Buffy's vision of the army of Turokans, all anxious to tear them apart. They begin charging for them as Willow begins channeling the mystical influence of the Scythe to unlock the Slayer line, activating every potential to become a Slayer with the strength and abilities included. In doing this, she becomes the opposite of Dark Willow, her hair turning a bright white as Kennedy proclaims.
You are a goddess.
Kennedy runs off with the scythe for Buffy, joining the fight. Buffy gets stabbed during the fight, collapsing to the ground as she watches Slayers get killed around her. During the most tense part of the battle, Buffy instructs Faith to take over and holding the line of defence, as Amanda is killed by a Turakan. The Turakans begin to get out of the Hellmouth as Andrew and Anya begin fighting them off. Unfortunately, bringers begin flooding the school too. The First begins to mock Buffy for giving up so easily, which of course makes her stand up and continue fighting even though she's wounded. Spike's amulet activates, causing him to kill Turakans in the hundreds with beams of light that shoot from it. As the Hellmouth begins to cave in, the Slayers all pile out, except Buffy, who holds Spike's hand for a moment.
I love you.
No, you don't. But thanks for saying it.
Buffy leaves as Spike says his final line.
I want to see how it ends.
Spike sacrifices himself to save the world, concluding one of the greatest character arcs in television history. As they all leave, Xander frantically looks around for Anya, unaware of her death. Everyone else is already inside the bus outside, waiting for Buffy, who has to run to catch up with the bus as the entirety of Sunnydale begins caving in behind her. She manages to leap onto the bus as they drive out of Sunnydale, stopping once the coast is clear. They all get out to compose themselves, observing their victory.
What did this?
Spike.
Andrew comforts Xander, falsely informing him that Anya died saving his life, which makes his storytelling talents not seem too pointless.
That's my girl. Always doing the stupid thing.
Robin manages to survive his stab wound as he and Faith can presumably start their relationship. The gang all congregate around where Sunnydale once stood, bantering around as Dawn turns to Buffy.
Yeah, Buffy. What are we gonna do now?
On my first watch, I remember feeling unsatisfied with this ending. It left things ambiguous, the characters don't seem finished, and there's still problems to work out. Following the many rewatches that have occurred since then, including the one for this video, I see it now. The first episode is Buffy's first day on the Hellmouth. The last episode is Buffy's last day on the Hellmouth. The thing that's been causing all of Buffy's problems, be it with the world ending or her relationship worries or losing the ability to love, her capabilities as a slayer and as a leader, have all been because she was on the Hellmouth. It was always her primary concern, even if she didn't realise it. She couldn't do the things she wanted in life because she was there and she was the only one who had to defend the world from it. In the final scene, she doesn't say anything after Spike's name. Instead, she smiles, as now it's all over. There's no point in going on. The Hellmouth is gone. She isn't the only slayer in the world. She can live the life she wants from this point forward, and that brings the entire point of the show to a great curtain fall. The false ending in Season 5 was great, and her sacrifice to save the world proves that she was the greatest slayer that had ever lived. But the problem is that the attacks were going to keep happening. The Hellmouth was still alive. I believe that this ending is the better ending. Now, if you ask me what season was better, I would say Season 5 without hesitation. But as a final episode, to close out the show and Buffy's character, this is the way it had to be done, and I love it. Xander ends the show alone, with a pointless revival of his relationship with Anya, which the show wrote out last season. I suppose Xander wished to remain alone after that episode, so it's fitting that he's surrounded by friends. The person he was closest to gets killed, similar to how one of the people he was closest to got killed in the opening double episode of the show. His big quest was to court Buffy, but instead he found love with Anya. Once they split up, like I mentioned earlier, it might have made some sort of sense to have him start a relationship with Buffy. Again, the original plan was to kill Xander off before this, which might explain why he has one of the most disappointing conclusions of the characters. The reason why they didn't, like I mentioned before, as far as I could muster, was that because Emma Caulfield made it very clear she wasn't interested in ever returning for reunions and was insistent they killed Anya off. I think they thought it would be overkill to have both Xander and Anya die in the final arc of the show, even though it probably would have given them both a happier ending, to be reunited in the afterlife than have one die and the other a depressed pirate. Anya's character was super disappointing this season. She makes a realization partway into the season that she can't be a vengeance demon anymore and is willing to sacrifice herself in order to restore the wishes she's granted. This doesn't happen, and she proceeds to do nothing for almost the entire season before reuniting with Xander and dying. Why didn't they just kill her off when she had the spotlight on her in Selfless? It would have been such a better ending for her character than, oh, she's dead, oh, blinking, you missed it. Joss Whedon acknowledged this in an interview shortly after Buffy ended, saying, "I wanted to kill somebody, and I wanted to do it brutally and suddenly and never really pay it off. I wanted a death that was a real middle-of-the-battle death, the opposite of the Spike death, which was perfect, noble." It's an interesting idea, sure, I'll give him that, but I disagree with this decision. Anya is such a beloved character, and while I understand not wanting to do two big deaths in one episode following Spike's, this gives them all the more reason for doing it in Selfless instead of here. Willow is a character whose ending is based entirely around the opposite of her Season 6 character arc, the abuse of magic in Dark Willow. She spent the whole season afraid of what she's capable of until she becomes a goddess by changing the course of the Slayer line, and in turn, the entire world. Her relationship with Kennedy is certainly not one that I see lasting forever, like I could see with her and Tara had she not died. And as it turns out, so did the writers, as in the comics, the relationship is already over at the start of Season 8. Oh god, it's so obvious. They really wanted to give Willow as good an ending as she had in the false ending, where she was a confident and competent witch with a girlfriend she was in love with. Now she's a former junkie murderer that's trying her best to go on after the death of her girlfriend. It's a more morbid and realistic ending, sure, but it's so obvious to me that Season 6 really did a number on her character, and picking up the pieces here was clearly difficult for the writers. That being said, if we ignore the comics and say that Kennedy and Willow live happily ever after, it's a fine ending, I suppose. Dawn has a lot of development this season, from getting to properly take on her first vampire in the season premiere to fighting side by side with the rest of the gang. She got what she always wanted, and that's to be one of the gang. Her character is much better this season than the last, but Empty Places, man, that episode has to ruin everything, doesn't it? She wouldn't do this. I get that some things play into the decision, but she really wouldn't do this. You know who else wouldn't do this? Fucking Giles. Jesus, what did they do to you? People point to Cordelia in season 4 of Angel as the worst character assassination of both shows, and while it's definitely up there, Giles has become a backstabbing, faithless, supposed father figure for a character that he trained. They do fix him before the very end, but for a character who accuses Buffy of being naive, he's about the most naive of them all. Add assassination of a beloved character to the list of similarities between season 4 of Angel and season 7 of Buffy. Robin is introduced as a brief character for the season, and I liked him. The only real asshole thing he does is go behind Buffy's back and then refuse to stand up for her because he thinks Faith is more attractive. That must be why he does it, I swear to God. However, he learns his lesson by the end, and because he's a character that's just come into the show, I don't feel surprised or betrayed by his actions anywhere near as I am by Giles. Faith enters into the fray at the tail end of the season, and although most of her development happens on Angel, she manages to make up with Buffy and redeem herself of her past actions by saving the world alongside the gang. She also gets what she's always wanted: friends, comrades, people who believe in her and want her to lead, even if she leads them into a gunfight and a bomb, but I digress. Andrew is another character who redeems himself of his past actions by saving the world, or at least trying to help do so, using his storytelling abilities for good when it comes to Anya's death. And finally, Spike. After first being introduced as a big bad in season 2, he worked his way up to helping Buffy kill Angelus at the conclusion of that season before returning to Sunnydale, becoming the reluctant frenemy of the gang after the chip is put in his brain. His obsession with Buffy becomes unhealthy, and after he's finally given what he always wanted, which was her, he goes off the deep end, having a moment of clarity which pushes him to get his soul. He loved Buffy, but the temptation was too much to bear, so he does this act to prevent it from overcoming him again, like in Seeing Red. He saves the world by sacrificing himself to destroy the Hellmouth, giving him one of the greatest character developments in television history, from villain to hero in a seamless 6-season progression. He was pulled through the ringer at points, but by the time the finale happens, it doesn't seem out of character for him at all to sacrifice himself. Buffy finally tells him she loves him, even though he knows she doesn't mean it, which was foreshadowed all the way back in Help with Cassie. They knew what they were doing with Spike this season, and it really shows as he's stellar throughout. Having his character end here is the right way for him to go, in my opinion. Season 7 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a good season of Buffy. Its main problem is that it isn't a good final season of Buffy. Don't get me wrong, I loved the first half of the season, him excluded, but after First Date, things start to take a real weird turn. Some characters aren't the same as they once were, and the final arc, although it has some really strong points, is ultimately disappointing to me. You know why, so I won't repeat myself, but I enjoyed Season 7 of Buffy. I believe most of its hate comes because it's the last, and it's not a great last season. I find it better than 1 and 4, because there's a real sense of direction, even if it's the wrong direction. I like 6, which was just a completely different show. I put this alongside 6 if I had to put it somewhere, because even though I enjoyed 7, it ain't even touching 2, 3 and 5. No sir, not even close. My favourite episode was Conversations with Dead People. Although not the most action-packed or thrilling, it was an extremely unique take on revealing the big bad for the season through a series of conversations, without even name-dropping the first once. My least favourite episode is Him. Although Empty Places wasn't far behind, at least that contributed to the plot. Him does nothing for anyone, it's pure filler, and you all know I hate that word, and I never use that word lightly. But it is filler. Buffy began its life as a mid-season replacement, running on a shoestring budget before catapulting into the limelight with a successful spin-off, comics and merchandise. It helped shape the golden age of television, which we're still in today. Season-long story arcs were already a thing when it came around, but watching that evolution play out before you during the first few seasons of the show, maturing into a show that I say holds up tremendously well, even nearly 20 years after it ended. This is my favourite show for a reason. The writing is quippy, snarky, intelligent and entertaining, without even breaking a metaphorical sweat. It has its ups and downs like every show, but when I think back to any point in the show, I still love it, no matter what. Because it's Buffy, and even though technically the story isn't over because Angel ran for a season after this, and some of the elements of the ending to Buffy play a part in that season of Angel, this to me is where things end for the gang. And I love season 5 of Angel, and I'll rave about it during my video, but for the core gang of Buffy I mean, this is the ending for them. Thanks to all who have joined me on this journey over the past year and a half, and while it's not over yet, it certainly feels like the end of an era. Will I look at the comics? Hell, I'll give them a go again. Maybe make a podcast thing where I talk about it for a while unscripted or something, but however batshit insane they get, it doesn't affect the show for me. Here's to you, Buffy. And here's to how fucking glad I am this shit isn't getting a reboot now.